Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast, episode 263. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Sean Whalen, drnorge on the comic forums, and I'm joined on this episode by friend of the show, Darrell Taylor. Jim is in Italy, and Darrell was nice enough to step in and fill in for Jim on this episode as we discuss Batman: The Gates of Gotham, issues 1 and 2. We're also going to be discussing Flashpoint Wonder Woman and Detective Comics 877. Our opening segment, Darrell and I talk about what's coming up in September, the big changes to DC, and the more news that's been released, some of the things that we're excited for, some of our hopes for this launch, some of the things we're concerned about, and our own history with the titles at DC that we wished had stuck around longer, and how we're hoping that some of these newer titles in September, with launching with all the number ones, are going to stick around. So a lot of speculation, a lot of excitement coming up with September in DC Comics. So I want to thank Darrell for joining us on this episode. Listener voicemails, by the way, will return on our next episode. If you've never called our show a voicemail line, it's 1-440-388-4434 or drnorge on Skype. And please feel free to share any of your thoughts on this episode, any of the topics we talk about, anything currently going on at DC Comics that you'd like to get shouted on the show. But I'll definitely have a listener voicemail segment prepared for that next episode. Our sponsors for this episode are DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. Over at DCBService.com, I want to remind you to check out the new books that are going to be coming up for this month. It's the beginning of July, and they're going to, literally in the next few days, be putting up the next new batch of books, which are going to be the books in September. So you're going to get some great discounts on those 52 issues that are going to be coming out from DC. So check out DCBService.com for that. Over at InStockTrades.com, I want to shout out the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen Volume 1. We're going to be doing that as our August book of the month. And if you haven't read League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, this is a wonderful series by Alan Moore with art and cover by Kevin O'Neill. It's regularly $14.95, 38% off, only $9.27 at InStockTrades.com. So definitely check that out and pick it up. It's a wonderful series, and it's very different from the film for any of you that's seen the film. So this would be a great opportunity for you to read that book and join us for that discussion in August. Actually, speaking of DCB Service and InStockTrades.com, I want to remind you about our show summer contest. What do superheroes do in the summer? Actually, what do supervillains do in the summer? These are going to be serious or parodies. Tell us what your favorite hero or villain does during summer vacation. This can be also teams and groups and things like that. It's pretty open-ended on that end. Really, I'm looking for a chance for you guys to be creative with doing things like songs, comic strips, Photoshop pictures. It can be characters from the past or present DC. Heck, even have some fun with the upcoming reboot over this. The first prize is going to be your choice of the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen Omnibus or The Legends of the Dark Knight Marshall Rogers hardcover. These are two $50 books. The second prize winner is going to get the alternate choice to whatever the first prize winner gets to choose. So we're giving away two $50 books as a part of this contest, and I want to thank DCBService.com for helping support this contest with that. Third prize is going to get a choice from our listener and show-donated comic and trade prize bag. And these entries are due on the last day of July in any time zone and should be emailed to ragingbullets@gmail.com with the heading Summer Contest. James, what kind of a podcast are we?
Well, we are a spoiler podcast. We go in-depth into plotline, story twists, and whatnot of the comics we're reviewing in the show. So if we're going over something you haven't read, you may want to come back later so you can better enjoy the show.
Hello, Sean and Jim.
Joining us for this episode is going to be a friend, actually joining me, I shouldn't say us unless I have multiple personalities joining us. It's going to be a friend of the show, Darrell Taylor. And Darrell, welcome back to Raging Bullets.
Thanks for having me back.
I'm not used to introducing somebody when there's nobody else here with me. Like Sybil.
I know.
It's Darrell and the three of me.
We're all here together.
Darrell, you're going to be joining me for some specific issues that we're going to be talking about. But first of all, before we get into that, we were having a casual discussion. Just this relaunch thing is really interesting. One of the areas that I found in recent shows we've been discussing more and more is Superman-related books. And you and I were talking casually about our love for the Sterling Gates and Jamal Igle run of Supergirl, which to me pretty much so defined... they didn't cover her origin because that had already been done.
Right.
What they did was, through storytelling, they defined who she is now and how she interacts with people. And I thought that was pretty darn near perfect. Mm-hmm. A lot of my concern with looking at, and we're dealing with just blurbs at this point. So again, we don't know what direction the creative team's going to go in. So I do want to preface by putting that disclaimer on this, but it does look like they're jumping Supergirl back to the point where she was very distant from humanity.
Right.
And I don't mind if they set that up as an initial spot as far as defining that that's what she was like, and we're going to lead her back into being this more likable, accessible Supergirl that we saw. But I definitely want it to go in the direction where we get this Supergirl that Gates and Igle work with, because I really grew to love this character where she was, and I don't have any qualms saying it. She was unlikable when she initially was launched on the scene.
Yeah, she was. I mean, she was what? She would go through her tantrums, and she would be angry a lot. And it got to the point where I don't even know why you're even here on the planet, because you didn't even want to be, like she always had something where she just didn't want to be here.
And I liked that journey. I mean, I liked that, they took us through all the stages. They didn't all of a sudden just say, wow, now she's nice. So I was glad to see that they went through that stage, but I don't necessarily want to read that again. And I'm not saying we're getting that, because I don't know, speculation-wise, what direction they're going to go in with the character. I have a funny feeling that, especially from the announcements that we've seen, we're going to see a lot of these initial books explain early origins of the character and how they apply to now, and then bring them more into what they're like present day. So that could be the case of what's going on with Supergirl and Superboy and Superman, where we're going to be seeing them initially in some of their titles a little bit earlier in their career, and then that it will be... Because JLA, I know, is definitely the first arc of JLA is set in the past. It is not
5
set...
years, right?
Yeah, which to me, I'm excited for that.
Yeah, I want to, see the journey of how they formed together. I mean, and it's funny because I just reread All-Star Superman, and I was thinking, like, reading the solicitations for Supergirl, how she's kind of aloof and from Earth, not really liking people, Earthlings or whatever. It made me think maybe they're going to that point when Kryptonians were kind of their society was pretty much all science, and they didn't even touch each other, and they had babies in the birthing tubes, the incubators, and they were pretty much kind of standoffish. And it makes me think, you see the armor on Supergirl, and you see kind of like a alien armor on Superman. I wonder if they're going to tap into, because Morrison did a really good story with that.
And I have no problem with them exploring more Kryptonian culture and how Supergirl would have more of a life on Krypton, and that culture would come to Earth. So that I don't have an issue with. And seeing how she, especially if we're going back to a lot of her beginnings, especially how that type of Supergirl would be interacting with our people. So that's why I said a lot of times, we're doing a lot of speculation off of blurbs. That could very well be the direction they're going in, and that would be cool. So there are a lot of ways where a lot of what I've read in the blurb could turn into being something tremendously interesting. That's a title I'm tentative on because of how, and it is a testament to how much I'm liking her now. So I'm curious to see what's going to happen with that.
Yeah, Sterling and Igle, they pretty much spoiled me on other versions of Supergirl.
That's nice, though, because I do think every character has certain runs throughout their career that are definitive runs, where you look back at them, and no matter what they do in the future, you're going to get more future runs like that. You're going to get those creative teams that hit that ball out of the park again with new storytelling.
Right.
But to me, you need to have runs with certain characters. That's what builds a passion for them. That's why you even care, do we care that they're doing new things to her? Yes, because we like that run. You're like me. You've been reading, for your whole life and all that. So you've been through reboots and relaunches before.
Oh, yeah.
Do you think that prepares you for stuff like this? Like the fact that you've experienced it before? Or does that make you more worried? Like, where are you at on all that?
You know what? I've never had any worry since it started. Like, if anything, I've been kind of excited to see what they do.
It was funny. Initially, I was I think I was a lot more worried than I am now. I'm not worried now. It's not even the right word. You know what? I started looking for first characters. Like, where are my favorite characters going to wind up? And the only real issue that I have, the ones that I'm really sad are missing, are things like Secret Six,
right?
Which I'm really digging. JSA, Power Girl, stuff like that. You know, that just clearly certain areas. Because there's other characters that I'm like, okay, these characters could clearly still appear again. And they might be folded into other titles, and we're going to get to see those opportunities for those characters. But then I started looking for creators. And that's when I started getting more comforted. There's still some missing creators that I'm hoping that after this initial wave is announced, that we're going to get to see them somewhere, because I think that they really understand what makes good comic book storytelling. So I would like to see them announced being somewhere after this on some title. But for right now, I was really happy with the creator lineup that I'm seeing, other than the few of my favorites that are missing still. Like some of the creators we're going to talk about today are actually have me comforted because they're going to be involved in these books.
Well, yeah, with Snyder, Scott Snyder, and Kyle Higgins, I didn't know what he had done. And I'm reading Gates of Gotham, and I didn't even realize that they were writing that together.
Yeah, so that has me, and he did Kyle Higgins did the dialogue in these issues.
And what makes it good is that I didn't question. I didn't think to myself, wait a minute, this sounds like this doesn't work, or the writing doesn't fit with the story, or whatever. And I've been reading detectives since Scott Snyder got on it, and they just blended in so well that when I looked at it, I said, you know what, I'm not worried about Nightwing.
No, not at all. Because the understanding of the character in this, and this is a good way, I think, to break him in and get him used to working with these characters, because this miniseries has been really tremendous. I'm glad we're going to be talking about this one, because I think it's one that deserves to be.
Yeah, it looks like this will be after Flashpoint is over, and they kind of transition into the relaunch, as they say. It looks like this is kind of, it's hard to say what it is. Reboot, relaunch. I'm not scared of reboot. Like, I'm not, it doesn't worry me. I just want good stories. That's all I want.
Yeah, that's really, I'm glad that not everything Batman's being thrown out the window. So right. I'm with you. I take a lot of what we're reading in this Gates of Gotham miniseries to be, it's still going to be intact post all of this. I think what's going to be interesting to see, though, is like we see Cassandra Cain featured prominently in this, and I'm not quite sure what her role is going to be in the Bat universe after this. She's the Black Bat in this. Batman Inc.'s still going to be in place post that universe, but with Barbara Gordon becoming Batgirl again, what does that mean for the Batgirl progression? And those are questions that, not worries that I have, they're questions that I have in how they're going to play this.
Well, they have so many scenes with her in this particular mini that they didn't even have to have her in it. That makes me think maybe there's a place for her. Like, the reason why they have her in this is because they're going to have a place for her in the, when they restart the books again.
Yeah, I don't know. Let me ask you a question. Would you have an issue if they didn't?
I would miss her. Like, there are characters I'm going to miss. But I kind of have to say to myself after a while, because when they did the Spider-Man thing and they rebooted the marriage out, and I got so mad, and I was like, I'm not buying another Spider-Man book ever again, and I haven't bought it. I have to really, like, when they started talking about DC, and I've been seeing the anger people have had about it, I have to sit back and go, you know what? They're not my characters. Like, I don't own them.
Right.
I'm here for the journey. You know what I mean? I don't own these characters. They're not mine. They can do what they want with them. Either I like the story or I don't. And I think kind of when I put that out of my, just put that aside, I could sit here and just not get mad about it. It's and I understand the love of characters because I love these characters. I love them. I've been reading them since I was a kid. Years of stories, on Marvel, DC. You love these characters all the time, but sometimes we get a little bit too caught up to the point where little things that you really shouldn't worry about because you just might get a better story.
Well, that's what I think that's our big worry. I think once you start reading the books, and if it's a really good story, you're going to hear a lot less complaining,
Right.
and more buzz, on that end. And not everybody, like you said, not everybody's complaining. Like I'm with you. I fall in the camp that's excited now. I'm definitely, there's a few little things that like I'm worried about, but that's true of the current continuity. Like there's books that I'm missing right now that I would love to see back again. A great example of this would be I loved All New Adam. It was a book that just didn't succeed, but I really enjoyed that, and it's a book to this day I still miss. So there's stuff like that. The Worldstorm relaunch, when that first hit, there were a number of titles I was really digging in that Worldstorm relaunch, and they aren't with us anymore. So that's not to say like everything right now is perfect. There's titles that are canceled all the time that I would like to see back again. Vigilante, I was really liking that run. And to S.H.I.E.L.D., that was a book that was S.H.I.E.L.D., that was a book I thought was pretty cutting edge for its time, and it's a book that I'm sad. I'm glad I got to read it, but I'm really sad that it didn't take off in a way where we could still be talking about that book now, because I thought what they were doing with the art direction and overall story presentation was really cool. Checkmate.
Yeah, I loved Checkmate was my absolute favorite DC story. Like every issue, it just felt like it added to just a bigger story, and then when you find out that the book is going to be canceled, that's it.
Yeah.
I felt bad. Like I still miss it. I still miss the stories, and it just had that. It just had something special about the book to me. It's kind of like with Gail Simone on Birds of Prey, or Batgirl was another book that's just special.
Yeah, Brian Q. Miller's Batgirl's awesome. I also liked Shadow Pact and Rebels are another two like cutting-edge titles that I thought they were very similar to what we were talking about with Checkmate. They covered areas of the DC universe that we don't normally see covered.
Right.
So they were interesting and just a little different flavor. And the problem is a lot of times when you're launching some of those titles, like there's a lot of them in September that I'm looking at, wow, this is really a cool area that they're going to be exploring in the DC universe. I'm excited to see how they do this. Those are the titles that I get worried about because I'm like, I'm so glad they're putting them out there, and I hope people give them a shot. And I do think with what they're doing and releasing so many number ones, there's a chance that some of these books that you wouldn't normally see stick might have a chance of sticking this time around because of the way they're doing it and when. There might be enough energy in this that we might get some different characters that are breaking out a little bit in this, and that's my hope from this whole thing.
Dude, like I love, being a person of color, I want to see some characters of color in stories, and you just don't have as much. And I don't want it forced, but it just is nice to see, somebody like Cyborg in it. And I know people, scratch their heads like, why is he in the book? But I mean, to others, he may not be the character that that's your favorite, but to others, he is. He was the one of the first like black superheroes that I saw in school. When they had those little pamphlets, they gave out the little cartoons, the anti-drugs and all that. And I would see the symbols of the Teen Titans to see Cyborg running along with Robin. Has always been a character that I've loved and enjoyed, and Wonder Girl and Roy, and it just to see that, it meant a lot to me.
And he's got a lot of longevity. Like he's not a new character.
No.
This is a character that they're launching into Justice League at a time where I really think that he will be beneficial on that team. I'm excited to see, because he's interesting. There's a vulnerability to Vic Stone with dealing with the fact that he really is fighting for his humanity.
Right.
And fighting to maintain that in the part of being part machine like that. I've always liked that kind of exploration of him because he's a misfit.
Yeah,
and I think we've all been misfits in our life at one time or another, and you can relate to that in that character. And it's funny, Jim never read like New Teen Titans or any of that stuff by Wolfman and Perez, but Vic Stone's one of his favorite characters, and that was from the Johns Teen Titans run. Really got behind that character. So I do think that there's different generations who know this character, and I was glad to see him when he was on Smallville.
I was too.
So I think he's a character that has legs, and robotic, but but I mean, I do think he's a character that I think could, really gain some serious fan attachment as jumping to an A. Cause I think he's a serious B-list character. Meaning that I think he's a strong upper level DC Universe character that is on the cusp of becoming an A-lister.
Yeah, and people don't realize. I think when we're in this comic community, but it's so small. There are so many people that don't know these characters at all, and I think that this is what this relaunch is trying to do, is trying to introduce these characters who we all like and read and care about, trying to get other people to maybe check it out. Look at them, check them out, see what makes these characters special.
Mr. Terrific is a book that was I was so glad to see somebody from JSA in present day, in September, because his leadership of the Justice Society, I should say, almost said Justice League, Justice Society, was something that I really enjoyed seeing with the character. So giving him a solo series, it's going to be interesting to see if there's any acknowledgement of the JSA, because I don't know that there would be in this world. So what's his backstory going to be? He's definitely a character that is very modern and very today and very cutting edge. Mm-hmm. And he was one of my favorite new characters in that JSA relaunch way back when they did it. So I'm glad to see that he is going to be sticking around and that we're going to get a chance to see him in a solo series. Because I don't think they've ever, I'm trying to remember, I don't think there may have been a mini-series way back then from him. Maybe.
Well, there was that. The only one I can remember, and it wasn't just him, but it was the JSA versus Cobra, which is a good series. He was him and Power Girl were kind of the main characters of it. They had that chess game between him and Cobra, and it really kind of spotlighted what makes him such a good character.
I'm thinking of Dr. Midnight. I was trying to think of what JSA character am I thinking of that had a miniseries way back when. Dr. Midnight had that very cool Matt Wagner miniseries way back when.
That established him as a good character also.
Yeah. That's a character who I'd like to see. I liked the idea of there being like a chief medical officer of the DC superhero community. So I'm hoping on some level we get that character back again.
Well, we got there is legacy, because we have the Sergeant Rock coming out, and this one is going to be the grandson of the original Sergeant Rock, if I'm correct. Yeah,
and I'm glad to see we're getting another, military style book.
Again, we got the Blackhawks.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, so that's another title.
So maybe, hopefully, they could have something where we'll get to the legacy characters a little bit later.
Yeah.
Maybe they're different, as in kind of like with Smallville, how they did the JSA was kind of underground. They didn't really show themselves.
And that would be, I have no problem with that if they end up going that route with it. I think a lot of our questions are going to be answered in Flashpoint as far as how they wound up at this point.
Right.
So it's kind of fun to think about it now and explore that with the titles being announced. I was like surprised to see they were launching Batwing into a series. And I mean that in a good way, in the sense that it was a very pleasant surprise, because I lost Azrael, which I was really digging, and I was glad to see them trying another character in the Bat universe that's just a little different, because I do think there's
that's a tough sell. I mean, there are people I know, friends of mine who are like, really, that out of all the characters in the Bat Inc., the Batman Inc., why did they pick that one per se? But I admit it myself. I'm going to get it, but I know that he's going to be a tough sell. He's just not that well-known a character. To have him, he was barely in Bat Inc. right now, Batman Inc. So, but like they said, they want to try to, have some diversity in the line. And if it doesn't sell, then it doesn't sell. It sounds like, Bob Harris said that they're going to see what works, and what doesn't work, they're going to, stop and move the next group of books up.
And see, I'm excited for that. You got to try some new things.
Right.
That's how you get new characters. Like Batwing interests me just because there's a hole now, in my opinion, in the Bat books with that different character, that unique one that's in there. Batgirl fits that to a certain extent, in the sense that Stephanie Brown, I think, has been kind of a unique voice in the Bat universe. A little young, a little fresh, fun. Azrael, really cutting edge, I thought, storytelling in it. I thought the religious exploration they did with that was really cool. I think it was a book that you had to give it some time in order to really get into what was going on with the character. I do think the latter part of the run really started to pay off some of the things that they introduced way back when he was originally appearing. So it's a character that I'm sad to see gone from a solo series, because there's room for that different character, and I'm hoping Batwing fills that void for me. I'm not saying it should be the same style as Azrael. Don't get me wrong on that. It's just this character that explores a Batman concept in some different way and a different location. I'm curious to see, where his base of operations actually going to be. Learn more of his background, because Batman Inc., like you said, we got a small taste of this character, and he was interesting in those issues. I want to see more development of him, and I like the idea of them taking a risk with this character. Judd Winnick writing it after Generation Lost and his recent Power Girl run, I'm very Winnick happy. So I think this is a writer who is going to not be afraid to tell a different... it's not just going to be Batman somewhere else. It's really going to, I think, catch the flavor of this guy and what makes him cool. Yes, he's going to have some of the same modus operandi as Batman because he's funded by Batman Inc., but the difference is going to be like Power Girl was the Superman. It's, similar power sets, but very different characters.
Well, I could, even if they did I would be happy even if they did a 4-issue run of this character. Give me that. And then if they did another 4 issues of maybe Cassandra, in Japan, or maybe, maybe they use that to focus in on a different Batman character and give them a little light.
Yeah, that's the cool thing about trying it out. Wait. The best thing that could happen is this character takes off. He's got incredibly interesting cutting-edge stories, and we've got another Batwoman on our hands. You know what I mean? That breakout... Batwoman became, to me, like a breakout character where there was a lot of buzz behind her. And I'm hoping in September, when that book is relaunched, that buzz maintains, because I think that was an interesting character that's been launched recently.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm hoping Batwing is another Batwoman.
I hope so. I mean, with the point, I just hope that with the digital, I'm not into the digital stuff, but it's not really aimed at me because I'm gonna go buy the comic anyway. It's. I hope that it can at least get a few, even if it's just another 100,000 people. That with the numbers that we've had that are just shrinking, that's something that looking at the numbers every month would get me down. All these books that I really enjoyed, that you just saw the numbers just shrinking every month. They have to do something.
See, to me, the price point is a key issue on the digital. First of all, I love the way that they're supporting retailers by releasing them day and date, same price.
Right.
Which gives your retailer a shot who does a discount, because a lot of your retailers now do, whether you're doing mail order or in shop, a lot of your in shop stores as well will do a discounted pull list. So it's a great opportunity for retailers to take advantage of the early adopters, which so many of us fanboys are. We want the book right away. So that fits me to the T. I'm there. So the paper product for us, that's where you go. On the other hand, after a month, you get the $1.99 price point for the digital. What I'd like to see them do is after 12 months, everything's 99 cents.
I'm hoping that the market, just like with music, let the market will decide what the price is, and I hope that if after a couple of weeks, like you said, if it's a month, that they can knock it down a little bit more or start putting issues in bundles.
Yeah, well, they did say that it's the way the pricing structure is going to work for the digital is after 4 weeks, it drops to $1.99 for the $2.99 books,
right?
And then everything $3.99, like the JLA book, which is going to be a $3.99er, because I think that's oversized. Is if I think what the issue was, I don't remember how that's working.
I think they said that. I think they said it's more pages than the average.
I think there's a backup story in it. I think is what the issue is there. Any $3.99 books would then go to $2.99. So what I'd like to see is after a year on the digital end, to bring in some new people who want to buy things in bundles, because they're doing a lot of these 99-cent 101 issue sales on the digital end. I think that's great for older material, and it's a good idea. So I'd like to see them after a year, though, do that more widespread. After a year, because you don't want to, like, I'm all for the idea of supporting the retailers. You have to do that.
Yeah, you do.
But then you build a new digital collector with that route. And that's really what you got to look at. The digital audience has to be looked at as different, and they've got to be targeted differently. Because, like you said, if you're making a mistake if you're targeting the current paper people with the digital. You really want to be targeting a new audience, hopefully of people who maybe haven't tried comics before but are into apps. And the great thing about those apps are, if you buy something on an app, you read it on you can read it also on your computer. You can read it on a different platform. So, like if you've got an Apple app, you can also read that same issue on your Android app, and then on your computer or laptop or whatever. So your collection's able to travel with you no matter what type of device you buy, even if you upgrade.
Well, I have an iPad, and even though I'm not into digital comics, I had to get the app, and I found myself, going through some of the free comics that they offer to different apps, and I was looking at it. I mean, it looks beautiful on screen. Like, I cannot deny that.
You know what I grabbed there recently was the Flashpoint digital preview. I'm not digital preview, I'm sorry, digital deluxe issue. It has the entire first issue of Flashpoint with the pencil artwork, and then inked artwork. So you can actually, and then, obviously in the main issue itself, you've got the final stage. But that was a premium price that you paid for it on the app. But I don't, like an issue like that, I wouldn't normally, I've got the Flashpoint paper issue, so why would I get that? But I ended up getting that for that purpose, and I liked that, because you could actually go to the end of the book, and then you go through it, and you can look at the entire pencil artwork, then see the next stage with the ink artwork. I'd like to see more of that done, because I think that's a neat idea. I like the idea that they're bundling the first Justice League issue in a way where you can buy it for an extra $1 with the digital issue there for those people that want both.
Well, I know Mike Norton for his side stuff, his creative own work he's doing. I haven't been able to download the app yet, but I know there is an app where not only do you get, you buy the comic, but you also get to see how he did it. Like the pencils before it's colored and all that kind of stuff. You get the extra stuff that would kind of like a DVD. I like all the extras on a DVD. Imagine if you get, Mike Norton or Jamal Igle or Jim Lee, or, have one of them talking to you through the process of how they came up with a character or how they designed the character.
It'd be great if they take advantage of the app and every month include with the paper comic digital extras.
Yes.
That, like, if you bought it on the app, you get those digital extras, and then if you buy it in the comic store, you get a code, so you get the digital extras if you bought it in the comic shop. That, to me, that kind of stuff, I would like to see more of. So that way you make the app useful for all kinds of fans. And that supports the retail then, because it's kind of like you walk in the retail and go, hey, if I'm going to walk out of here with some digital extras too, and it's kind of a nice bleeding over of both, which supports retail.
Right, and the energy that we put in, like, I've seen a lot of energy put into, I don't like this, or I don't like that, or, which is fine. If you buy it, you don't like it, you have the right to say that. But you have to tell the companies what you like and what you don't like. Because if they don't know, they won't know unless you say, I would like to see this, or I would buy an app that had this in it. And ideas, if you give them these ideas, you'd be surprised in what they pick up, because they do listen. I mean, they're on Twitter, they're on Facebook, they have the letters pages now. I mean, you'd be surprised if, like they have Formspring, even some of the writers and editors and stuff have Formspring. If you take out a little less of the snark and really ask them a valid, like a really question about, why'd you do this with the character? Or I did like this version or this story, and I wish I could see a little bit more of that. You'd be surprised in how that could help them decide in what they're going to do, with books.
Well, I think September is going to be a critical month for a lot of positive rant threads. You know, if you're liking a newer title, like we mentioned Batwing and Mr. Terrific, but also things like Firestorm. You know, they're relaunching that Firestorm book again, which I'm really excited about.
Right.
You know, Blue Beetle's coming back. You know, these are different characters who, you know, and then to me, like All-Star, or was it All-Star Western? Whatever they're renaming Jonah Hex.
Yeah, I think it's All-Star Western.
You know, to me, I'm just glad that I'm getting Jonah Hex still. Titles like that, it's really, really important in September. If you like one of these breakout titles, or even that new anthology one that they're doing, let people know. Start up rant threads about that, talking about the positives and pointing people to those books. Because sales numbers are going to be critical on those titles as well, because, you know, there's going to be a lot of cutting edge. Captain Atom is one that I'm particularly interested in. It looks like a different sort of exploration of what happened to that guy and what it means to him. You know, I've got my eye on that title. I think that's going to be particularly cool. The creative team just looks right. Those titles, it's really important that you let people know, hey, if you're not reading this, check it out, and you can check it out on the ground floor. You know, you're not telling somebody like 200 issues in, pick up this book. Right. Telling him during issue 1 and issue 2, you know, or wherever you're, you know, during the arc, whenever you get sold on a book, if you do, it's really important to do that. I'm not saying go and, you know, praise a book that you don't like. That's not my point. No. My point is for these ones that you find love for that are, you know, a little unique title, a little off to the side that you weren't expecting to get into. Stormwatch to me looks pretty interesting with the way that it's being set up. So, you know, some of these titles that are going to be just a little bit wacky and a little bit different that they're launching. Animal Man, I think that's going to, you know, be an interesting series potentially. So, you know, I'm looking to see what to me, you know, gets me interested in a character that maybe I haven't read before, because I haven't read solo Animal Man. I've read in trade. I've never read an Animal Man series other than like they did that recent mini that they did Last Days of Animal Man. But I've never read Animal Man. I never had a budget to read Animal Man, so I'm excited for that.
Well, I'm like a demon, what is it? The Demon Hunter, it was the Entrican series that they're doing, and it's set in the past, which is kind of interesting to me. And then they have Mike Costa on, I think he's the one doing the Blackhawks, and I like G.I. Joe. So that makes me want to check it out and see what he does. And by using the history of DC, you know, DC characters to kind of have their own style of army book.
I do like that they're trying to, it looks like, round off. You know, like take a look at, okay, we haven't done books in this category in a while. Let's give this a shot and see how it works. I'm glad to see more of that.
Yeah, and I was a Stormwatch fan early on, and then I stayed with them throughout. So when I saw, you know, Stormwatch and Grifter and Voodoo looks like it's going to be interesting too. And I like Ron Moore's writing. So that's something new for me that I'm going to, you know, check out. Ron
Marsh sold me on Witchblade.
Yeah.
And that's not an insult to any Witchblade that came beforehand. I never read Witchblade, but I always liked Ron Mars when he was on Green Lantern. So when I heard he was taking over Witchblade, I'm like, I'll give this a shot. You know, I've never read Witchblade before. And boy, right out of the starting gate, I thought his Witchblade was absolutely tremendous. So, I loved him from Green Lantern. So, I mean, now you got Ron Mars coming back, and he's been doing Voodoo at DC. I'm like, okay, Ron Mars, let's check him out. What's he going to do here with Voodoo?
And I love cop stuff. Like, and that's something that, like, when I say to people, like, instead of saying you don't like it because you don't like it, you could get somebody to try a book by not saying that this book is better than what you're reading now, but by saying, if you like cop books, if you like a Batman book, a detective book, you're going to like Witchblade because you get a lot of the cop procedure in Witchblade.
There's a lot of different titles being. It's funny. I was first, you know, I was thinking before, well, and there's going to be, you know, the usual suspects, then, you know, a few different characters. Out of that 52, there's a lot of unique titles that are being launched that are surprising me. That, like, I'm like, whoa, they're going to, you know, go this route with that. I'm excited for that, just to see some different characters that I haven't seen spotlighted in a while.
Oh yeah, and 52 is not not a lot compared to, you know, how many books they did before that. You know, how many books shipped in a month before, and Marvel, I think, ships like 100 and something books. So just wait. I'm excited even to see what's the other wave of books that we haven't even heard about yet.
This is a good way to do it. I think to do like a first wave like this and get people excited, and then gradually build to a second wave and just kind of expand out the universe from this. This is really in it because they seem to be categorizing them in these neat little pockets that are working. And obviously you've got to do your old faithfuls like your Bat Family, get them up and structured. Green Lantern, get them back and structured. Superman books, get them back and structured. You're the ones you're expecting. New Wonder Woman, which I'm hoping. Geez. I'm hoping that this Wonder Woman, takes off and, drums up more of an audience than... Not that Wonder Woman's had a bad audience. I don't mean it that way. I love Wonder Woman. I think it's just a great character. And I don't get why she doesn't have more of an audience than she does.
She hasn't been able to connect.
Yeah.
There's something that's not connecting with a lot of people with Wonder Woman that I hope that... that this time, I hope that it could, start like what George Perez did when he came on the book. It pretty much rebooted it and build a nice world around Wonder Woman, and it was strong for a long time. And then,
it had a lot of strong runs after Perez, though. I'm not saying. I mean, there was pockets. It's kind of like what we said about Supergirl. There were a lot of runs that I can look back to on Wonder Woman that were strong. It's one of those characters that I don't think the issue has ever been the quality on Wonder Woman, because I think you can look back through her history right up to present day, and you can look at a lot of quality runs that have been in place there where you can say, well, why didn't people jump on this? And I don't know what is keeping people from trying the character, because I really think that's the issue more than anything. Because I think if you're a new reader and you try the character... you've got books like I mentioned, Witchblade. I think there's companies that are right now proving that you can put out a strong female character and people will follow it. Right. The flagship character of Top Cow's Witchblade. Now, to compare the sales numbers between the two, okay, we're dealing with two different animals, and I get and respect that, fine. But on the DC end, Wonder Woman to me is every bit as cool as Witchblade. She's had some amazing runs, some very badass runs, and I think she's a character that should be viewed as cutting edge as that. And I'm hoping that, with this relaunch, that some people will try Wonder Woman that haven't before and really get to understand what's cool about the character, because I do think the character's always been cool. There's always been something about her that's cool and interesting. It's just getting people to keep from holding back on trying the character.
Like I hear people with Wonder Woman talk about, like, she seems so... She's like the untouchable character. Like, you don't want to gritty her up. You don't want to do too much to her because she's thought of as a goddess in a way. Like Superman. Superman is just so... he's truth, justice, and, he never does anything bad. He never has bad thoughts. Like, that's what the perception people have, that he's just perfect. And Wonder Woman is the same way. And when you try to do anything, it seems like when you try to do different things with Wonder Woman, people just get scared, or they don't want to read it, because it takes away the image that they think Wonder Woman should be.
I think that's an outside perception, though. Mm-hmm. Because I think that they have... See, to me, some of my favorite Superman and Wonder Woman stories have been the stories where writers, and this has happened recently, have made both of them vulnerable, while at the same time not losing... You're right about those qualities, like Wonder Woman being a goddess and all that, and Superman's strength qualities and all that. But I think it is possible throughout both of those characters' histories to look back and see their vulnerabilities. Even when Byrne did the relaunch of Man of Steel... that miniseries is chock full of the vulnerabilities of Clark.
Oh yeah. It's like on Wonder Woman we've had Phil Jimenez. He did a great run where he showed her fears, her weaknesses. Like she's and she overcomes them every time, and that's what makes her such an interesting character. And then you had Greg Rucka was a really great run.
Did you read Mesner Loeb's? I don't even know if I'm pronouncing it right.
Yeah, I did read. I read those runs.
Tremendous run.
Mm-hmm. Gail Simone, of course.
Oh,
that was a fabulous run also.
Yeah, her run we couldn't stop talking about on the show, not because we had to, because the book was just that darn good.
Yeah, yeah, and Superman's been the same way. I mean, he's had quite a bit of good runs, but for whatever reason, and you don't have to like them. You know, like it's every character. Not everybody likes every character. You know, but it's just sometimes you hear a perception of that no one is just that good. You know, it's just no fun reading a story about somebody that is just so good that they don't ever do anything wrong. And there's been plenty of stories where they've done things wrong and then they had to make up for them, and that's what made them heroes, because they overcame the things that they did and they admitted the stuff that they do wrong.
See, I like hero vulnerability. We're going to talk a little bit about Detective Comics on this episode, and that's what I think we'll jump into that, start talking into some of the Bat books next that we wanted to chat. But one of the things that I really like about Scott Snyder's detective run right now is seeing the vulnerability of Dick Grayson. While at the same time, it's not all his vulnerability. It's not like him, he's constantly dejected. It's that we see that along with that great strength we see with him, we see the vulnerability and how he works past it. Because to me, vulnerability is a great tool with heroes, because you want to know that these characters are vulnerable, because to me it adds more respect when they, pull up those boots and they kick into gear, because it's like, wow, in spite of all those feelings, they still find a way to press on and they still find a way to achieve victory. And it's something we all deal with on a daily basis, those moments, and we're not always as successful. But it does make you get inspired to say, okay, I'm going to try again tomorrow.
Well, that's what I like about, I think that's what a lot of people have really liked about how they've been writing, how all the writers that have been dealing with Dick Grayson as Batman, how they write him, because he does make you think, like, what if you got to actually fill the shoes of the person that you've looked up to your entire life, and you had to actually do their job now and keep their legacy going, and he's done that, and you've gotten to see the mistakes he's made, and he he's thinking to himself, I should have did this or I should have did that, and you get to see all those things he's done and still overcome them, and still he feels like he came up a little short, even though he saved the day, he saved the girl, he got the bad guy. But every mission, you never see Dick Grayson tell himself, yeah, I'm Batman, I can do that, that's no problem. He's saying to himself, I'm glad that I didn't fail my mentor.
Well, the funny part was with Dick Grayson, and this is something where, on the positive side of that, because I know a lot of people who have been following Dick Grayson's Batman were kind of upset that it's going back to just being Bruce.
Right.
But we got so much more Dick Grayson's Batman than was originally intended. Because if you take a look at the original plan, because there's a lot of that around, you can look around the net, that was really supposed to be a very short time frame of Dick and Damian, as Batman and Robin, and it was supposed to be Bruce back, and that was that. They responded. It's a great example of where they were listening to fans. They were responding to the positive feedback they were getting from fans on Dick Grayson as Batman, and they kept it going. That's why we've got the 3 titles that we've got going currently up until this relaunch, where we get to see these characters kind of play out all the way through until whatever happens in Flashpoint happens that we get September. So I'm really glad that we got to enjoy these stories to their completion, these new arcs. Because the Scott Snyder arc, I'm guessing if we go off of that original plan, this wouldn't have happened if they hadn't been listening to the fans.
Yeah, I think, because I think Bruce Wayne was supposed to be, once the return, I think they were supposed to kind of transition him into, and then it wouldn't even have been a Batman Inc., I don't think.
No, I think, I'm wondering if Batman Inc. was supposed to be part of the plan all along, and they just expand, figuring, okay, if we got Batman Inc. going on, that does provide an opportunity to have a Batman in Gotham. I think Bruce was supposed to originally, I'm guessing, and this is just speculation on my end, if it was supposed to be just Bruce being Batman, we were going to get Batman Inc. with Bruce still being the Batman of Gotham, along with doing his journeys, I guess.
Well, I know Morrison said that he had a certain set of stories he was going to do, but as he was writing them and enjoying them, that the story just went longer. It went like a year longer than what he originally planned, because he just enjoyed writing these characters and writing Bruce Wayne's story so much that he had more, and and the other books were doing so well. I mean, I think the bad books have been the most stable in terms of sales out of all the DC books, except for maybe the Green Lanterns.
Yeah. And the Bat books, to me, they've all been good. Like, there's none of them that I'm picking up and going, this one's just okay. I got to be honest with you, every Batman title that they've been doing during this Batgirl, you mentioned Batgirl earlier, that to me is a great example of a title that is, yes, it's a Bat book, but it's so different. Birds of Prey falls into the Bat book category. Red Robin, I think, has been really terrific with Tim. Bruce's books have been great. The Dark Knight's the only one where I think, the releases of that has really hurt that book for me. The first couple issues I'm interested in, but it's, this spaced out type of thing with that title, which I'm glad to see when that book's being relaunched in September. It's going, it's not going to be Finch alone.
Right.
I think that'll greatly help getting a feel for, the direction of that series, to have somebody else on there to make sure that book stays on time. Because that's the only bad title right now, I would say, that I'm just really kind of on the fence about, because I don't feel like I've gotten enough progression to feel heavily invested in it. But the rest of the books, like Batman Inc. is tremendous. They talk about a big adventure story and shows why Bruce is different than Dick Grayson.
Mm-hmm. And it even showed, Morrison did a great job of showing Bruce come from what he came from. Before he left, he went through a dark period. He was having issues with everybody, and to come through that, go through that whole thing with going through time and coming back, I liked how when he talked to each member, pretty much his children, he did things differently this time with each of them. He hugged him. When was the last time Bruce Wayne hugged somebody?
That was one of my favorite moments.
He would never, before he died, he would never have been able to, he just didn't have the tools to be able to go and know that Tim needed to be reassured. He would have never felt that. He would have thought to himself, he would have spoke to Alfred, he would have said, well, you need to go talk to Tim because I think he's upset. And Alfred would have been the one to go talk to him. But, for Bruce to do it, and then when he had the scenes with Stephanie Brown, he knew that she, he pretty much he treated her really bad, when she was Robin, and he knew that she needed to feel that she could stand strong on her own and that he respected her, and he gave her that.
And he wouldn't have done that before all that.
No.
Because the mission was more important, and now I think he sees the mission a very different way.
Right.
And I think that's something we're not going to lose in September. We might be getting a younger Bruce Wayne, because I'm guessing he's going to be sort of a quote-unquote younger-ish version of himself.
Without saying it?
Yeah, but I mean, with Damian being there, we're obviously going to have most of his progression in place. Well,
that was the interview. They did one on Newsrama. Scott Snyder did that, and he said that most of the stuff that all of the stuff with Tim and the Batman Inc. stuff and that stuff happened, he said. So they're not taking those good stories away.
Which, to me, has me a lot more comforted. They're just looking at a way to shake up the universe as a whole.
Right.
So a lot of those things can happen and be re-explained, because think about it. There's been times where Wonder Woman was a founding member of the Justice League. Wonder Woman wasn't a founding member of the Justice League, depending on how you look at it. That's been interchanged and flip-flopped so many times. Superman, look at his relationship with the Legion of Superheroes. In some storytelling, Superman never met them when he was a kid because there was no quote-unquote Superboy. Then that's been worked back in that he did know the Legion. Now, what's his status quo going to look like when the relaunch happens? I don't know. Those are intriguing things that I'm looking forward to seeing how that happens. And that's part of comics. We've seen those things taken away and put back before. So I'm going to be curious to see what's taken away and what's put back and how the new things are explained. Because there's a lot of new things that they're doing that are going to have to be explained with the characters that aren't losing a lot of their past. Green Lantern obviously is going to be I don't want to say untouched is a wrong word. The past is going to be there for Green Lantern, which means there's going to be a new status quo, but the past is going to be there for those characters. Batman, the past is going to be there, but that means there's going to be elements of the past that are going to have to change with some of the new things that they're doing. You know, when characters met, what their relationship is, and things like that are going to be different. So I'm looking forward to seeing how those things are gradually interwoven into what's already been established for us. So,
yeah, because you actually can read a book with someone and not know everything. You know, like we're the comic readers. We're pretty much veterans on continuity. So when someone else comes into it, we can tell them we can give them a lifetime of story of what happened with the character. But now we actually have to sit there with someone who might be picking this up for the first time and not know exactly what's going to be happening.
But in some cases, we're still going to have those things to share as well. So it's a nice little balance of, hey, here's new twists and turns that are going to be folded in, which puts everybody on the ground floor. But then there is still that classic continuity that's there. And because those stories existed, that makes a link to every other story that may be phased into a new direction because of this. But because you can say, well, before Flashpoint, this is how Batman knew this guy. So you have that there's a link to both continuities in what's coming in September. So it really, in an interesting way, because of whatever event is going to happen that's going to cause what happens in September, there's going to be a link between September and the past. Still, it's not a complete reboot where we're losing everything. And because those links are there, it's this event happened, these changes happened because of it, but these are still our people. And I like that. That type of balance, I think, is really interesting. It's something for the old fans and a ground floor setup for the new fans, which the more I'm thinking about this, you're taking somebody like me who is a classic fan who was scared for like the first couple days of this announcement, to an old school fan who's remembering what it was like in '86 when Man of Steel came out, and I was drooling at the idea of reading more Superman. Because I remember reading the last Superman story before the Man of Steel, the Alan Moore thing.
Oh, yeah.
What was going on. I remember reading that and going, oh my gosh, how are you going to follow this? And boy, they did.
We think that, though, like, how could they top the last story? How could they top this? How could they top that? And that's the thing. You don't know. Like, you don't know what story you're going to get next. That might just be, one of the most important stories that you care about. Once they kill off when they change up something or they do a reboot, because you don't know who would have known Man of Steel would have been that popular after an Alan Moore run.
I'm looking to get the stories with characters because I remember this in '86. It was a time for fresh storytelling for a lot of characters. Just something a little different, a different take on a character, just a fresh look. There was energy that was there with Wonder Woman and with Superman. And, Batman, my energy was already there. But these were characters I wasn't reading previously. Green Arrow. That Green Arrow was a character who I knew from backups in Justice League. So I didn't really know him as a solo character other than, like I said, a small little backup feature like we got with Elongated Man.
Yeah.
But it was so cool to get a Green Arrow series and be able to follow him. That's why I'm thinking of books like your Captain Adams and getting a Firestorm back finally and stuff like that, as just being some different characters that are going to be fun to explore in all this as well. But Superman, I'm getting more and more comforted when I realize that some of his storytelling is going to be in the past. Like the whole Justice League thing, knowing that him and Wonder Woman dating each other is set in their past. So
I kind of want to see. I want to, and I love Lois. I like the character of Lois Lane, but I kind of want to see. That's something I always wanted to see. Like, what would it be like if Wonder Woman dated Superman?
Well, on the last episode of the show, and it was something that to me was a big distinction. I pointed out that there's a big difference to me between Clark and Lois getting a divorce or their marriage being wiped out and moving on to Superman afterwards, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Like, saying that this is the same guy, but he's no longer married to her. And we're going to explore an earlier period of his life leading up to that. And with there being 2 books, my understanding is that the 2 books are going to have different time periods. So who knows what it's going to be like for Superman in his book. They could very well be together, or it could be, more set present day where their relationship is leading towards them being together and married. I don't know. Those are question marks for me. Because I know Morrison's book is supposed to be the one set in the past.
Right.
But I think Perez's book is supposed to be the one that's set in modern day. So what is his status quo in the modern day book has me very intrigued. Now that I know
remember when they weren't together. I remember when Lois was still in love with Superman and Clark was in love with her.
And see, that to me is the only thing they could do to really tick me off is not have those 2 eventually wind up together. Mm-hmm. Or, they could see, because I think there's a possibility they could be together out of the starting gate, or in that period where they're showing us them building towards getting together. And I'm fine with that. I'm not a big fan of we're going to divorce them, we're going to, the marriage didn't exist, that type of thing. I don't want to see that. But I have no problem with them explaining a modern day version of how, if that's the route they're going, of how they got together.
They do.
Are there any other characters that you're, as long as we're on this tangent before we get started, are there any other characters that you are intrigued about or curious about, like how are they going to explain that?
Martian Manhunter and the Stormwatch.
Yeah, that was I mentioned earlier that I was interested in Stormwatch. Mm-hmm. That was what intrigued me because I do think that he's a character. At first I was like, really? And then the more I started thinking about Stormwatch, because a lot of my Stormwatch exposure originally was PhD. I read all of that series straight on through to the end.
Right.
And it was another one of my favorite because I liked things like Tranquility and Gen 13 and all that stuff. But Stormwatch was I knew those books I wasn't like because Gail Simone was writing them, so that was kind of a lock. Stormwatch was a surprise for me because it came out of nowhere, and that was Christos Gage, I believe, that originally kicked that one off, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
That was a tremendous read. But through that and through my enjoyment of that and how this leads back to Stormwatch and the Authority, through Stormwatch, I started reading past Stormwatch trades. And then I started doing the same thing for things like the Authority. So there's a lot of characters from Wildstorm who I'm glad to see that are being kind of folded into the DC universe. Because I was a fan when they tried this with First Wave. I was a fan when they tried this with those Red Circle characters. Mm-hmm. And I really wish that I'm glad we're going to see Static. Zombie, I think, has been a really great book that I'm sad is going to be kind of lost in the shuffle. I'm hoping they try to relaunch it again.
I hope so.
Because Zombie, I think has been tremendous. I'm glad that they're going to some of these other, because clearly they own the Wildstorm characters because of the acquisition. So I'm glad they're trying to bring, because there's some unique characters in the Wildstorm universe that I'm glad to see kind of folded in. And Martian Manhunter actually fits in theme and tone, especially with where he was at the end of Brightest Day. A character that would look really good and work really well on Stormwatch.
Well, it's the problem. People forget. There's a stigma that Wildstorm has now, but people forget there were a lot of writers that are doing other books now that people love that are very popular that came out of Wildstorm.
And I mean, it was something at the time. Wildstorm. I remember reading a lot of Wildstorm when it first came out. Just because I liked a lot of the creators that were there.
Warren Ellis.
Yeah.
Morrison. Well, Christos Gage was in it. Who else? There's other writers before that, and I'm trying to think of.
A lot of great artists came out of Wildstorm.
Travis. No, he did. The one I was thinking of, the one that drew Wildcats, but now he's not really doing.
Charist.
Yeah, Charist. Yeah, that's what I was trying to think.
I know I butchered that too.
Just do. I'm trying to think. Now none of them come to my mind. When other times when I'm thinking about it, they come to my mind. But now they're not. But if people go back and look up older Storm, older Wildstorm books, there are a lot. You'd be surprised at the creators and artists that worked on those books.
Why don't we go ahead and jump right into Gates of Gotham?
Okay.
To the Batmobile. Let's go. Atomic batteries to power. Turbines to speed. Ready to move up.
I actually wanted to start recording some just little bits and pieces of this because I think it's funny. We're getting ready to jump in and talk about Gates of Gotham, but you and I were talking about some of the negativity about the relaunch. And what kicked off this discussion is I made the point and I was laughing about it. Negativity, I have no problem with. People don't, like something because, they're heavily invested in books and in characters. And they're like, okay, I'm reading this character right now and you're making what looks like drastic changes to the character. So I'm scared. I'm nervous about that.
Right.
I get that vibe and I can connect with a lot of that. But I was laughing because I've been reading a lot of stuff on the net from people who clearly by the end of their rant, it's clear that they aren't even reading the character that they're complaining about. I'm like, what are you complaining about? You don't even read this. And if they weren't doing this, you wouldn't even be talking about this character. So you're by your negative rant, you're adding a ton of validity to what they're doing because it's got you talking about this character who you don't even read.
Like in one tweet, I'll hear a complaint, like the same people that have tweeted about Superman does nothing but walk. I don't want to read it. Why would you care what they do to it now? And then they jump to get well, how dare they just reboot everything and change the story? You were not reading it.
Well, the people who say Superman does nothing but walk, I'm like, you aren't reading it then. Because that's not what's happening in Grounded. I mean, it really isn't. I mean, I can understand. First of all, I respect people. If you don't like the story and it's not your cup of tea, I 110% respect that. But there's people who are making a statement like Superman, all he's doing right now in his book is walking. And I'm like, you're not reading the book. You read one issue of Grounded and you've made that judgment, or maybe never read it at all, and you're just doing some hearsay off of that. And you're like making these sweeping statements like Superman stinks because this is all he's doing. It's like unless you're reading the book and you're heavily invested in it, where you're sitting there going, oh, you think you'd be thrilled that you're like, okay, if the idea of Grounded doesn't sound good to you right now and you're not reading Superman, you think you'd be thrilled that they're doing something different.
Not happy at all. And Chris Robinson has been kicking his behind trying to get out this book.
Yes.
And having a ball doing it. He loves the character of Superman. He loves it. That's all he talks about. We mentioned Superman to him.
And this guy's iZombie, I don't know if you're reading that.
Yes, it's wonderful.
Tremendous book. Like, this Chris Robertson's somebody to watch. And he did that Cinderella. Fable Towns.
Which is what I loved first. I think that was the first thing I ever read from him.
Both of those minis, tremendous. So this is a writer I'm like, ooh, it's kind of fun to see him. So I'm glad that this is breaking him into like a DC Universe look for him.
I hope, because he really writes women well.
Yeah.
He's another character. He really, and he does an ensemble really well too, in character interaction. So I really hope that he has a book in the next wave of DC books.
Speaking of writers, though, like transitioning from Vertigo and things like that, we have to talk about Scott Snyder and Kyle Higgins. Scott Snyder in particular, I'm talking about from the Vertigo transition from the Great American Vampire series. Doing this Gates of Gotham. And, we're going to talk about issue 1 and 2 as we go through. This is a great way for me to get to know Kyle Higgins. And actually, I want to correct myself from something I said earlier. Kyle Higgins did do the dialogue. I was right on that. I was trying to figure out which one was the one doing the dialogue on this one. The story is written by Scott Snyder and Kyle Higgins. Kyle Higgins is on the dialogue. Trevor McCarthy is the art and cover. Guy Major on colors. Jared K. Fletcher on letters. Dustin Wen, the variant cover. Katie Kubert is the assistant editor, and Janelle Asselin is the associate editor, with Mike Martz as our editor. And this 2-issue series is great. It takes place in the past of Gotham, which I'm a Gotham junkie. I love seeing the history being brought in, and the idea of showing us from the ground floor how the big families, the Cobblepots, the Elliots, and of course the Waynes, how Gotham became the big city that we know today with some of its major landmarks. And it starts off with these 3 major bridges, but it's also the formation of where did these buildings come from and what was the overall plan for the city. Mm-hmm. Now, this was one, you mentioned this in our conversation. You said, I'd really like to talk about Gates of Gotham. What's drawing you to Gates of Gotham, Darrell? Why this series? Why did you want to talk about this one?
First of all, the interaction between with Dick Grayson and Tim. You really got to see some more interaction between Dick and Tim, because they've been kind of disconnected since he's been doing Batman, and he's been more with Damian than he has with Tim, and you forget that how close they were throughout their whole, throughout their stories. Like, they've really been brothers. They've really became close brothers.
And you know what the nice part about seeing them in this capacity, too, is we don't just get to see their interaction, but we also get to see their interaction with Cassandra and Damian. And get some great reminders that Cassandra has a rich relationship with Tim Drake and also Dick Grayson. But really, the closeness of the bond between Cassandra and Tim, at least in these initial 2 issues, is something that's really like her conversations with Tim. It's clear the two of them are willing to open up on their criticism on Damian. I like how they're connecting over the bratty little brother.
Like, I wanted to kill him too,
but then I'd have to explain it to Bruce. And I mean,
like, Damian is talking all this smack, and I'm thinking back. I've read all those issues of what she was trying to kill when you wasn't even a thought. She was killing people.
Well, and the cool thing about how that all plays out, though, is throughout this series, we talked about vulnerability earlier. We get to see some great vulnerability there with Cassandra.
Yeah.
And the way that she reacts to Tim, talking to Tim about how he has his role, he has his place, and they all know it. That he's the computer guy and he's there, to do some of the things that Dick isn't as talented in. Damian isn't as talented in. Tim's their go-to guy for that. And I think through that vulnerability, this is where seeing them in that light, I get why Damian's the way he is. A lot of times your kids that do what Damian does are because they feel this need to make sure that people see what their role is, that they have a role, because this kid hasn't had that opportunity to have that belonging, that role. Like Tim's is clearly defined, Damian's in his eyes isn't. A lot of his outward reactions now, and it's where he's become endearing to me, we've seen are due to the fact that he does have some vulnerabilities in there, emotional vulnerabilities. And the relationship with Dick Grayson has filled a hole for him that he didn't know that he had. So that's why he feels the need to make himself superior, quote unquote, to Cassandra when she comes in. And yet it does play off of her vulnerabilities and her sense of, do I belong on the team? Am I a part of the group? Because she's become kind of an outsider.
Yeah, after everything that when she was put in the Lazarus pit and brainwashed by Deathstroke and turned into a killer again, something she fought. She fought most of her life to get away from, to fight. The urge to kill. Things that her father pretty much drilled in her since a child, and it's sad that Damian and her have the closest history together of parents who pretty much try to force their children to be killers. Yeah,
exactly. And all because that was what their lifestyle was. Mm-hmm. That was how they grew up. That was their sense of their honor system. It's a twisted one.
Right.
And I'm not saying I respect it, but then to see these kids taken out of that world and put into one that does not welcome that, with Bruce. Because he's got strict codes against that.
Yeah.
Is something that I think is interesting because it shows the positives of what he does for these kids a lot of times. You talk about the negatives about, the danger that he puts members of the Bat family in, but these are 2 kids in particular who there's been positive benefits to their relationship with him in the sense that it's given them an outlook of a different sort of life than they may have led at becoming assassins. It's yes, they've fallen off the path, like Cassandra has or something like that. But there's been those second chance opportunities to jump back on the path.
He picked them up, like he never really truly deserted them per se. And even with and you always had that thing with Cassandra with Tim. I used to love when they would have interaction in her book because she looked at Tim as that light. Like he was actually able to be a child and grow up. And no matter what happened to him, he always had that light. Even when he got darkest and things were, he lost his mother and he lost his father, he still had that sense of goodness in him. And she always saw it in him. Even when he didn't see it, she always saw that.
It's interesting with her. I'd almost like a different name for her than the Black Bat. But that's nitpicky because I was just so thrilled to see her back in some kind of variation of her suit. Because she is a character who I think would be interesting to see post all of this in September.
Yeah.
And see her maybe maintain that role. I liked that she's like Batman's Far East, like regional liaison there. And Damian tries to kind of poo-poo that role, but it actually is... Bruce is being very selective on who he picks as his agents in certain areas. So her being in the role that she's in is a role of trust.
Well, she's by herself.
Right.
Like he put her in that place alone. There isn't, I mean, there's a type of support, but for the most part, he put her in a dangerous place because he trusts her. And I think that Cassandra kind of has that, she's killed before. She's had that, that life where she's been in the most grimiest and dirtiest of places and have seen horrible things, and she's still been able to come out of it. And I think Bruce kind of sees that in her, so he trusts her because she comes out of it and not becoming even more dangerous than, because she could be the worst supervillain if she wanted to.
No, and to me, her story needs to be one of got past that. I don't want her to head down the dark path and see her down there. I didn't like her in that role.
Me either.
When she was there, I liked the stories where Tim was trying to reach her. And so, I mean, I did enjoy seeing that dynamic of Tim trying to reach her again, but I never liked her being in that role. And that's an interesting thing to say for me to say I liked the stories, but I didn't like her in that role. Because I did like the stories because I liked the opportunity for Tim to be kind of an interventionist, so to speak, saying, hey, wait a minute, you're one of us. What are you doing? During these moments.
Every bad thing she did, it kind of what made it even better is every bad thing she did under that drug that Slade was using on her, when she came out of it, you felt her pain even more.
Which to me, that having it be that Slade did that to her was one of the best things that they did.
When they did that, I was like, okay, she's back. She's back, and I hate Slade even more.
I like that we still feel the residue from that, though, if that makes sense. Like when she makes an appearance, things still feel tentative, if that makes sense. Like when she appeared in this, they were genuinely glad to see her, but it's clear that time has passed. And I that felt to me very real. Like it's like that friend that you haven't seen in a decade.
Yeah.
Comes back in, and you've got your friendship group that you regularly hang out with every week, and they're back in with the group, and it feels good because her relationship with Tim and all that. Yet there's also that sense of time that has passed. It just feels normal. I mean, that's the way things would be, which is a great example of, I thought, how both writers did a great job of capturing her in this bit, because there was that sense of, wow, she's with the group and she belongs, but then there was also that sense of, this is a little awkward for her too. It's especially with how Damian's so into the group.
Yeah. Well, like her, it's funny because I know they're not going to like each other because they're kind of alike. Damian and Cassandra need this. Tim doesn't. Tim could have a life. If he really had to, Tim can have a life. He could do a little swashbuckling every now and then, but for the most part, he could, become a teacher or something, and he'd be the best teacher there is. Same thing with Dick Grayson. He can go out there and have some type of kind of a normal life.
Well, we've seen it with him. When he became a police officer, we could have seen him take on a role of law enforcement, saying without the cape.
And a teacher. Remember when he was teaching gymnastics and how to work with those kids? Like, he could have a life. Cassandra, she needs, and I know Bruce knows this. I think that's what I think that's the connection that they have, that they both need this mission. They have to have it, or else they don't know what to do if they didn't have this mission in their lives.
I liked the excitement of Alan Wayne in this, where we got to see him with Nicholas Anders. Like he'd already begun all this work on these skyscrapers and really kind of taking Gotham to a new era. And it was cool to see the role that went, because we usually think of as kids growing up, it was always Thomas Wayne did all these things. Well, to realize that no, there was this rich legacy before Thomas Wayne, and the Wayne family for many generations have had a prominent role in the formation of Gotham, being one of its big name families all the way through. And then the Elliots, now that we've got Thomas Elliot established as, having a similar upbringing to Bruce, showing that that name meant something in the past. But Cobblepot.
Yeah.
How could you... having that legacy put in was something that I thought was brilliant as well. These three bridges being ones that... It's our way of finding out that what we knew about Gotham wasn't the whole story. Things have been renamed, and some of these things were lost in the past. And that's what I love about this. It's telling us new things about Gotham's past, kind of what Morrison did in Bruce Wayne's journey, The Return of Bruce Wayne.
Right.
This is filling in more details of Gotham's past in a way that sort of did, while at the same time not contradicting anything that we've known about the Gotham mythos, just adding to it and expanding it and enrich. I would read a whole series now on the history of Gotham. After
it
this.
makes it feel new to me now. Like reading all these stories, we've had years of stories about Gotham, and Batman and little stories here and there, but now you kind of get the sense, and I love when Dick Grayson said, "I lived here almost all my life, and now there's so much I don't know about Gotham."
When they meet this Anders, and he's showing them blueprints for the bridges, you see this Wayne Railroad and Transportation Company in the background, and realize, well, why does the train go through Wayne Tower? Because the family history was that they were the railroad people back then.
Yeah.
They were involved in that. So it's natural that their building would be the one that it would go through, and then that there would be more to it than that. They were philanthropists. They had their hands in a lot of things. And I love that this was kind of a natural transition from what happened with that was Cyrus Pinckney, wasn't that what it was? Who had started constructing some of those buildings. I loved seeing the layout of classic Gotham because it does feel like something out of the past, and that they had to deal with how do we structure these buildings so that they have a foundation that's strong enough. And we get to actually see that there was a new kind of thinking going on here. But I'm guessing what's happening in this storyline and where the direction it's going to go in is this Anders and what is his stepbrother? Is that what it is? Or brother?
I think brother. Well, half brothers, right?
Half brother. Because there was different names. Weren't there different last names?
Right.
Wasn't that that's how the Gates of Gotham thing comes about?
Exactly. The half brothers.
So he adopts the name of his half brother. And that was how they got that. But I'm guessing where we're going to find out is these two got left out in the cold.
Yeah, I'm getting a sense of that is coming up.
And this is a revenge story on that. Now, do you think it's one of them still alive?
I'm thinking it's an ancestor, because this is kind of like they keep pushing legacy.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, and even earlier Scott Snyder issues with legacy, with Zuko having a daughter and trying to get away from that. A lot of Scott Snyder's Batman stories seem to be about history, legacy, wanting to change, from your past, and this kind of makes me think of that. Maybe that's where this is going.
Yeah, because my original thinking was that there's no way one of them could still be alive, but then I was looking at that steampunk soup, and I'm like, are they going the techno end where somehow one of them found a way to cheat death or something like that by robotizing themselves? I'm like, it doesn't seem like that's the route they're going. It seems like a legacy, like you said, an ancestor found and realized, hey, wait a minute, look at these prominent families in Gotham. Look at the Waynes. Look at the Elliots. Look at how successful they've been. Cobblepots. They've all gotten into the money, and we got nothing.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
So I'm going to be curious to see what the history of this revenge is in this whole thing. I like how the reason why Cassandra was brought in was because of the explosives, and there was that Hong Kong tip-off about it. And the explosives really are the linking piece to all this. He's investigating these explosives, and I like how Batman's kind of because he's monitoring everything that goes on coming in and out of Gotham, but also with Batman Inc. and with Red Robin and everything, they've also got worldwide connections. Realizing these explosives were coming to Gotham, he would be tipped off enough, it just was too late. And I liked seeing that in this case, these guys had some cutting-edge information, but they're dealing with the aftermath. And their being there was important. Like, Dick and Tim really did have a prominent role here in the sense that if they weren't there, a lot more people would have died than did.
Oh,
but
yeah.
I kind of found it refreshing that some people did die, in the sense that it's nice to see that these guys are here. They're taking on overwhelming odds. They're doing what they can to help even up the odds. And they're helping the police, and because of that, their presence, lives were saved. But there's those moments of failure where they're like, we weren't fast enough. We didn't know the information soon enough. It shows a reason for them to keep upping their game. It shows a reason for them to keep doing more. It shows a reason for them to say, we've got to take down this big bad because look at what he did last time.
I'm glad you said it because I felt kind of bad because part of me when I read it and then they said where people were, had died and you see he's in the water. And he sees the bodies, and I'm sitting there going, I got kind of happy. Like, I'm glad that they actually showed you casualties instead of saying people died. You actually see firsthand that there are, people that didn't make it.
Well, here's a bit that really made it for me, because Gordon tells that whole bit where he tells him, go ahead and lean on this guy because we can't afford to waste any time. But then there's this moment where he goes, listen, I've been doing this a long time. If you're anything like the one before you, I know what you're probably thinking. But none of us knew what the targets were going to be. Try to remember that, okay? And you get no response, but you can tell that this was a moment that really hit Dick Grayson because of his respect for Jim Gordon. And that, to me, is why was I happy at that moment? Because if written right in a Batman book, these moments, you're going to get those powerful moments where you see, like, okay, this is what Jim Gordon brings to the table. This is what keeps Batman going. Because you know what? In that moment, when you have that kind of failure, what keeps you putting on the cape and cowl? Instead of going, am I doing any good? Did I accomplish anything here? It's that moment with Jim Gordon that makes him go, I'll let you know what Cobblepot turns up. That's what gets him going and lets him continue another day. Those powerful moments. And you need to see that in the Batman books. That's far more interesting to me than we win all the time. I mean, I love to see a Batman victory, and I love to see those moments where Batman's just a little bit further ahead of the villain. And this story, at the end, I'm sure it's going to have those moments where these guys finally catch the modus operandi of the guy, but that's part of the fun of the detective work of Batman. This
is what makes this story. I think this is what made The Dark Knight such a great movie.
Yeah.
As they captured this, like I keep like seeing that where you see the scene where he didn't rescue Rachel. He wasn't in time. He failed, and he got that boost from Alfred. You get these scenes with Commissioner, and a commissioner has cops under them that they lose partners. People die, and they're not able to help everybody, and they need somebody that they respect who's also been in the field and also been through the same things to say to them, it's not your fault. You did what you could do. As opposed to someone who is a civilian who really doesn't understand, who hasn't been, in that type of environment. It means more coming from a fellow cop or soldier or, somebody in the trenches with you.
One of my favorite things about the 60s Batman show, and then the cartoons that came afterwards, I'm talking about, even aside from the Super Friends, I'm talking about the solo Batman cartoons, was when we got to see gadgets like Batcopters and Batboats and Batmobiles and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
But I remember the Batmobile you saw every episode on the TV series. Eventually you got to the point where you did get to see like Barbara Gordon's Batcycle, and you got to see, like I said, the Batboat. This boat in this, it turns into the sub and all that. I love when different artists just have a different take on Bat gadgets and take it into the next generation. Like, this looks something you'd see in a modern video game.
Oh, yeah.
As like this cool vehicle. And the great thing about modern video games is you get to pilot a lot of this stuff in the video games. That's something I want to pilot in a video game. Like, I want to play that.
That's what's so great about the game, the Batman Arkham game.
Oh, yeah.
You get to do things with the gadget.
And that to me is a highlight of comics, though, that you get to see artists conceptualize things that continue pushing the boundaries. You would think by now that we'd be so desensitized to bad gadgets. They'd be like, oh, okay, another bad gadget, big deal. No, I got the same sense of wonder from that boat that I've gotten from just about every other bad gadget that's really cool and cutting edge done by an artist. I mean, they keep. It amazes me how a new creative talent, different creative take on something that I've seen for years can make me feel like a kid again with it and make me want to play with it. And
even the way that they showed Batman using his grapple gun was amazing.
Yeah, as a way to again, it talks about how is one man going to save, more than a couple people.
Right.
He saved over 30 lives, I think it was. Was it the total was? I forget. I know that there was a bunch of deaths and there was a bunch of lives, but you got to see him really trying to minimize casualties. And that's what he told Tim to do. He just said, "Hey, all we can do right now," and they had to decide, with there being only 2 of them in the 3 bridges, they had to decide between which bridges to save, and it was based on the number of people. So there was one whole bridge they had to let go.
And that's Bruce. That's Bruce training.
Yes.
Like that is what you get from Bruce training you day in, day out. Like to the point where I know there's days where they hated him.
Yeah.
But it's muscle memory now. Like he didn't even hesitate. He made a decision, whether it was the right one or the wrong one. He had to make a decision quick, and he had to stick to that decision.
But that's what made him hard too.
Right.
I mean, because you make those decisions, and eventually, and that's why Dick Grayson hasn't gotten to that point yet, but he starts to, at certain points, and it's how do you find a balance? It's one of the things I like about his Batman. It's how do you find a balance between being that hard person and keeping that bright side of you. A lot of that's what the dual identity's for.
Yeah, Bruce lost some of that, and what I like with Morrison is Bruce realized that he lost. He kind of lost a sense of himself by giving into that. And he regretted it. When he came back, he was like, I have to do things. Like, I still to this day, at reading Batman Return, when he said that I have to learn to do better. Right. Even after all the lives this guy has saved, how many times he practically saved the planet. And still he said, I have to learn new ways of accomplishing my mission. I have to learn new ways. I have to come up with new ideas. And that made me go, you know what? This is a Batman that grew. Like, this is a Bruce Wayne who really developed as a character and they didn't forget everything that happened, throughout all those other stories that have come before. Morrison took all that stuff and said, what would this man be like now after experiencing all these things? What would it change him into?
I like the handling of the Penguin in this.
Oh, yeah.
Because it would be important with a character like the Penguin, who's an opportunist. His reputation's incredibly important to him.
Oh, yeah.
And he doesn't want to be known as a stoolie, meaning, if you're given too much information to Batman, and we've already seen that he's had a falling out with Bruce. This, to me, shows great continuity, where we're seeing a Penguin now who's not so forthcoming with Dick Grayson until he realizes, hey, this guy's right. If they're blowing up the 3 bridges and they're attacking those families, he is going to come after me.
Yeah, so it is stupid.
Yeah, so it is to your advantage to give me a step in the right direction here, because if I stop this guy, it's only going to be good for you. So that whole play off of, and that's where he finds out about this interesting looking suit, which, for Batman, that's an incredibly important clue.
Oh, yeah.
Any clue is an incredibly important clue for the Bat family. And this does lead back to what you're talking about that's so great, to see Tim and Dick Grayson working together, brother and brother, in those situations. And, of course, they find out that the Elliots are involved as well, in time for our steampunk guy.
Yeah, they had that moment of, oh, boy, here we go again.
And I'm going to be curious to see, ultimately, who that is in the steampunk outfit. Because we see them capture Elliot and, take off with him. And Tommy Elliot's obsession with saying, hey, you can do what you want, but the Waynes are mine to take down, and that's obviously not going to go so well.
Even when he's captured, like, you're a prisoner of somebody else, and you're still talking smack to the guy.
So Bradley is brother's last name, because in the second issue, we see all this. This is the guy from the beginning, obviously Anders, talking about the city in the clouds. And the brother's last name, I guess, is Gates then, right?
I thought that came later.
No, what I'm saying is, though, because we're introduced to the brother here.
Oh, okay.
Because in the beginning, he's just talking about his brother and that relationship.
Right.
And I'm guessing when he's talking about the brother, that the brother's last name is Gates? Is that how you took that?
I think so, and that's why.
Because he said he took his surname.
Right. And he took on the brother's name.
And because they don't really define that, and it's not supposed to be, because we're getting bits and pieces of this mystery as it goes along. So, and because we're seeing some progression now, where in Alan Wayne and Cobblepot's and all that, some time has passed. They're meeting with the two brothers to discuss the bridges, and Cobblepot is the mayor now, who used to be involved in building, and he's kind of like, wait, how can we be constructing these big, huge buildings that you're talking about? And what about the foundation? And these two brothers, it looks like, had a huge role in the creation of Gotham. I mean, they created this kind of city in the clouds aspect of Gotham that was there. And they have to play off of the fact that we haven't heard of them before now.
And I love how one brother comes up with the ideas and the other brother implements them to make them real,
And you hear about this all the time, where there's people who are kind of left in the past, and, why were they ignored? Why weren't they given credit for something like that? It's actually a very topical conversation for a comic, to have this kind of thing, to look at this kind of legacy and start saying, well, why weren't these two guys, why isn't something named after them? Well, the bridges were originally known as the Gates of Gotham, but that's even kind of gone into obscurity.
Well, it's funny how you learn about, like, there's a guy I never knew, you know how to play a video game, and you learn about the company that did the first video game, but you don't know about the guy who came up with a way to make a cartridge so that you could take a game out.
Yes.
And put it in. And you forget all about him.
And especially, you'd think, with how many video games, and especially now that cartridges are obsolete, you're not going to, there's memory cards and stuff like that which have the same cartridge philosophy. But you're right, we don't know who the original people were who did that.
Because we wouldn't have had that. We needed that cartridge to get to the disc, to get to the memory cards and all that other stuff, but they had to have the cartridge first. Somebody had to come up with a thing where it's fun to play the game, but what if I want to take the game out and I want to put something else in? It's just amazing when you look at history and read inventions and stuff, when you learn of, one guy has one idea, but it started out with another guy thinking of something else, and just a sense of anything could happen, and one guy's idea is taken and the other guy's forgotten.
I love what's been established in both Detective Comics and in this series of the police work, where the meeting with Gordon and analyzing the situation and prioritizing again. Tommy Elliott's been captured. Mm-hmm. They've realized at this point that the Bridges have a connection to the three major families. So we can't stop there, because these bombers are going to start going after buildings associated, they're assuming, with, and rightfully so they're assuming, with the families. So they're looking at, we got to evacuate people from here, evacuate people from here, evacuate people from here. Cobblepot's not being so forthcoming. Big shock. Of course. and it really is, do we go after Elliot now? Do we go after these? What route do we take at the moment? Because obviously we have to pursue the Elliot angle to find out who this person is that's doing this, or people. Is it one? Is it more than one? And I used the term before that it's a guy. We don't know that it's a guy. There's nothing in that costume to indicate if we're dealing with a male or female at this point.
And what I also love about this is you see the amount of trust that Bruce and Dick and Tim have with each other. Like, this is not a Bruce Wayne Batman dealing with a situation. this is a Dick Grayson, and he takes in advice from everyone around him, and then he formulates a plan.
Well, and it's really the two of them are the veterans in this scenario. They're equals.
Yeah.
There's no, Dick defers to Tim and says, hey, Tim, can you handle this? I'll take care of this, and I'll do that. It's no issue of Tim can't handle this or anything like that. It's really the other two are left on stakeout duty, meaning Cassandra and Damian, while these two are like business as usual, really in many ways tried and true partners who are equals, full 100% equals, complete and total trust, knowing that each is going to know what to do. They're going to handle it a little differently, but they respect the way that they will handle it differently. And yet I think they're both fully aware of how the other person will handle it. Like, I think if you ask Dick Grayson, what's Tim going to do? He'll know. He'll be able to answer that question. And I loved, these are all things that are subtext on the page. Mm-hmm. None of this is spelled out. We just figure this out from the way they carry themselves, from the art direction, from dialogue between the two. It's very different than what you see with Cassandra and Damian later. And I do think that this offers the relationships of these two perched up here by the Wayne W. They're the two of them perched up there, which is it's an interesting spot for them to be. Does offer an interesting parallel to be able to watch and see what that relationship looks like. Because it is very different.
And they've earned this. This is stuff that went all the way back to Chuck Dixon.
Yes.
So they've earned this relationship. You go back and read earlier stuff and you see the progression. Because there were times when they did not trust in each other and bad things happened. And they learned from those mistakes.
Wasn't there a Lawrence in the '89 Batman movie? I'm watching Cobblepot shake this guy named Lawrence down, and I'm like, it seems to me there's a lot of Lawrences that pop up as thugs.
I know, right? That's just a common. You never think of that as a common thug name.
Yeah.
But I guess it is now.
What are you doing, Lawrence? But I love how that leads to, in the day and age of cell phones, you would think first that it's the cell phone. And who would be nuts enough to have a cell phone ringing and interrupting the Penguin? And it almost causes Lawrence to be killed. Yeah, because
the Penguin is he's so self-conscious about his looks that he overcompensates and his reactions to people.
Over at the Elliott Mansion, I liked seeing the newer version of the Batmobile, the Batman and Robin version, I should say, of the Batmobile.
One of my favorites.
Yeah, that new the one because we know it's going to fly.
Yes, that's exactly what it is because it's going to fly.
I love that bit with it because I'm like, that's kind of a cool little take on that gadget.
Remember the issue where the criminals were going somewhere and they were like, "Whoa, we got away. He couldn't fly," and then he started to fly anyway.
Yeah,
I love that. I love it. I don't care how many times they do it. When a dumb criminal thinks they got away, I love it when Batman or the hero finds a way to get him anyway.
Well, that was something I always liked about James Bond.
Yeah,
and it's an interesting trick with James Bond. It's you don't want the gadgets to be ridiculous, and sometimes they can do that. I'm a huge James Bond fan, but I will admit there's times where I've grunted and groaned at certain James Bond gadgets where I'm like, oh, really? We're going there with this?
Yeah, you mean Moonraker?
Yes, yes. Which and I'm a Bond enough junkie that I liked every Bond film, but you get into that. The Roger Moore era was a great example of where there's certain Roger Moore films like Live and Let Die and For Your Eyes Only that I thought were some of the better Roger Moore films. I think that Live and Let Die, I think, is probably his finest. I just love that whole New Orleans voodoo bit. But some of Moonraker with Jaws, who I loved as a villain, yet that was also one of the more cartoony villains.
Well, that was the version of James Bond when he became a superhero kind of and got away from the agent stuff a little bit.
And I think in the Best in Bat movies, it's where the gadgets are cutting edge and cool, and they don't get too cartoony.
Right.
And it's a hard balance when you get into gadgets and gizmos. Not everything needs to be the bat this, the bat that. But when you get like a Batmobile like this one and the Bat boat like the one that's introduced in here, those are gadgets where you just kind of go, wow, that's cool. It's not overdone. It's functional. The grappling, like you mentioned. I mean, that that segment, it was cool. It was functional. You got to see it. It wasn't too over the top.
Nope.
And that's a hard balance, I think, in this day and age to pull off because we've seen so much. But I think it's something that has been done very well in recent Batman comics. Like, I can't remember the last time I groaned at a Bat Gadget in any of the books. This past year, I think it's just done creative team's done a tremendous job, and beyond. Before that, I've seen some real. I can't remember the last Bat Gadget I really groaned over.
Yeah, they don't play with it. They don't use it as a crutch. They're kind of careful with that.
I think there's times where there's storytelling purposes that a gadget fits. Instead of, see, you said it the best. Don't use it as a crutch. Use it when it fits, like the storytelling calls for it, then it doesn't get cheesy. If you force it into the storytelling, it gets cheesy. That's the way you put. I'm like, boy, I'm trying to think out what's the difference is right now. And I think that's the balance that I think has been achieved by a lot of your writers today. They get that we don't need to throw in a gadget every 5 seconds. Make them functional, throw them in where it's necessary, and people are going to find them that much cooler when they make their appearances.
Definitely.
It's Cassandra. I actually would like to see her in some more fight scenes in this because I do like her fight. Like when I see her swinging in and crashing through the window, I do like her fight choreography. I like that with Cassandra. It's one of the things I liked with her versus Tim, for example, during that whole era, was that Tim didn't know if he could beat her. So I do hope we get to see a bit in this where we get to see her against a villain who can fight.
Well, I'm glad that they don't forget that her whole thing was her body language. Like she reads language, through the body, and she knows all these different fighting styles.
Right. I liked when we got to see the two different distinctions of the moments with the bombs, because both Dick and Tommy Elliott and Cassandra and Damian are faced with a bomb. Mm-hmm. And Damian is willing to go down. I mean, he's down at the 3 second mark, all the way down to clearly 1 by the time he was willing to risk blowing up to take out the bomb because he just had to. It was him. It's this need to prove that he could, just because I think he needs. I think it goes back to what I said earlier with Tim Drake. He needs that sense of reason for belonging.
Yeah.
And just to be able to say that, if he was able to stop the bomb and Grayson couldn't, for example, that's an edge that Damian needs. Damian seems to need that. It's not enough to... He doesn't pat Dick Grayson on the back and say, good job. He's always got to throw in some comeback on how he would have done it different. He would have done it better. He would have... it's always one-upmanship with Damian. And
Morrison wrote it best when Bruce was analyzing all of them to see how they did under his, without him being there. And he said, I can't be a mentor to Damian right now because he would concentrate too much on trying to impress me and he wouldn't grow.
Yeah, yeah. So in this sequence of events, we get to see, obviously, the fight between Damian and Cassandra. And actually, it seems like Cassandra actually was able to overtake him.
Cassandra's trying to not kill him.
Oh, exactly.
That's what it looks like to me.
But it also shows her maturity in that moment, though, because she doesn't step up to fight.
No.
She realizes why he's so hysterical. And I liked seeing her maturity here because she says, don't forget what matters. You're alive. And I love that she controlled herself there because I do feel that Cassandra at this stage is that mature. She's been through so much. And I liked seeing that control for her, so I thought that was a very well-written moment.
Well, considering that she could read body language and she knows what you feel, I think she saw that he was scared. He felt he felt angry that he failed. And I think that she read all of that, and that's how she was able to just say, this isn't about me, this is more about him.
Yeah, their name has to be Gates now, because I'm looking at this, and so it became that as we embarked on constructing the future, Bradley and I became known officially as the Gates of Gotham, meaning Bradley Gates and his brother. So that makes sense. That's the who of the two of them. So Bradley's name had to be originally Gates,
and the other brother was something else.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so the suits And they aren't the only ones wearing those suits, which I'm going to be honest with you, it's the first time I noticed. I've always focused on them and the background details. I never focused on the foreground, the fact that when they're looking at these guys down there, gentlemen, it's time to begin, there's like at least 3 other guys wearing the same kind of suits in the front row.
You know what? I'm looking at it right now, and I'm just looking at the backpack. I'm just noticing it myself. I just looked at the 2 guys, but I didn't look at the audience to see.
So that's funny. I wonder what the suits were for. I mean, obviously, I think we're going to see that next issue because obviously that's part of the history of this. We're getting to see the Gates gradually travel through time to present day to see what actually happened to them. So I don't think we've seen yet. I think we're making a pretty spot on assumption that the 2 of them were slighted, but I don't think we've seen yet how they were slighted.
Well, the guy that took Elliot had kind of a suit like that.
Oh, it's this. I think it's the same suit, or it's a modern version of it.
Yeah,
but I guess why I'm guessing you're right on the sense that this is some family member who maybe discovered the history, maybe rummaging through some family stuff, came across the suit, and if it's not the exact same suit, it's one that's inspired directly, I think, by that suit.
Yeah. Yeah, because to do this, I mean, this is a lot of anger to come at you pretty much coming at the strongest families in Gotham.
This is a 5-issue miniseries, though, that I recommend to anybody. If you are a Batman fan, a Bat junkie, even if you're not a Batman fan, you don't need to have been reading any Bat books to understand this. This story right out of the starting gate gives you some great history of Gotham. It's a nice contained story. I'm assuming it's going to wrap up nicely. There might be elements of it that it'll set up for future Batman storytelling, but I'm sure by the end we're done with this, we're going to get a resolution of what's going on with the Gates and how this all comes about. So this is a good one. If you're not a regular Batman reader, but you're interested in checking out these writers, Scott Snyder's American Vampire and Detective run has just been both have been stellar, including the American Vampire miniseries. It's just got kicked off. So this is a writer who is definitely on my watch list. DC's got a lot of talent right now.
To go from detective to go to the main Batman book like that, and I mean, it doesn't mean Tony Daniel's not a good writer either, because I've enjoyed his run too. But I mean, to have that much confidence, for them to have that much confidence in him as a writer, to put him in the Batman books, especially when they're doing the new relaunch, I mean, that says a lot.
Well, I think being on this detective run for him, which we'll talk about next. I just think, because I think we're just naturally transitioning into that, I just think has been a flagship stellar run as well. I'm going to go out on a limb and say, as far as the actual Batman titles right now, featuring a Batman, it's easily my favorite Dick Grayson Batman title. And that's not knocking the other works, because I'm with you. Tony Daniel, I think, has been hitting it out of the park. But this book is just a little bit more. So let's go ahead and talk about Detective after this.
Okay.
Can Batman escape? One hint, the worst is yet to come.
We've both been praising Scott Snyder, so this has become... it was funny, this wasn't intentional. It became kind of the Scott Snyder episode. This Detective Comics, it's issue number 877, and the writer of the book is obviously Scott Snyder. The art and cover is by Jock. Colors are by friend of the show, David Barron. Sal Cipriano on letters. Katie Kubert is the assistant editor. Jane Osselin, associate editor, and Mike Martz, editor. And this series, it actually reminds me a lot of what I was enjoying about, I mentioned The Shield in our opening segment of the show. The art direction of this has been one of those where it's been a very stylized Batman.
Oh, yeah.
And I've really loved that about this. It's been something just a little bit different, and it just reminds me of what I really like about comics. It's that every book has its own flavor. Every book has its own creative team who are setting, their own kind of bar for what great comics are, and taking a look at the character and saying, how do we define this? I'm not saying this is exclusive to the Bat books. I'm saying this is one of the things I like about DC Comics right now is a lot of my favorite books right now. Zatanna is a great example of that. Jamal Igle has jumped on that book recently. And when he jumped on the book, it was a book I was already digging and enjoying. But when he jumped on it, just something special happened with that book. Kind of like what happened when he jumped on Supergirl. And this is what I'm feeling with this Detective Comics. This run with Jock and David Barron. every issue with this. It's got a style to it. Like, I'd love to see this animated because I just think this would make a very cool, edgy animated film.
Definitely. Like, even when every artist that has been on this Scott Snyder run is fit the mood and the tone of the story.
Well, yeah, because the other artist, it's that...
the one doing, I think he's the one artist
it's
on...
Frank Avila or something like that. And I know I'm butchering that one. It's the one it was doing he was doing the backups when they were doing and they had him do some of the regular issues because those were the pieces that were supposed to be in the backup before.
Yeah, that's what it was.
But I feel that's no accident. Well, can we just jump to talking about Tiger Shark?
Yeah,
and then we can go back to kind of how it leads to that, because I think what I'm going to talk about right now, a lot of that stuff was setting up some history with Jim Gordon's son, who I think is Tiger Shark.
You know what? I didn't even connect it.
Because I think that this whole build to Jim Gordon's son and showing that this kid, I think the kid's not only bad, he's going to turn out to be another like Tommy Elliott Hush kind of villain. In the sense, I don't mean like he's going to be cookie cutter to that. I mean, when Hush was a miniseries that was created, the villain stood out so much that he's continuing to be used today, is how I'm making the comparison. I think we're establishing a villain here in James Gordon Jr. That is going to be a villain that's going to, and this is where I'm making the Hush connection, is going to last beyond this run. And maybe I'm wrong, it's not Tiger Shark, but there's got to be a point in this story where James Gordon Jr. is going to pop up and he's doing something really bad and shady. And when I was looking at the scope and scale at the end of this this Tiger Shark and the whale connection, think about back when James Gordon Jr. was a kid and that girl disappeared. And and there's the whole shark sequence of events and all that going on. I'm like, oh, wait a minute, is this when we had I'm like connecting back to that now and going, was that the origin of Tiger Shark?
I can't say that I think you're wrong. It just didn't occur to me that he is that, but I keep feeling every issue you feel the cloud of that character on every issue, and I don't know when he's going to strike.
Oh, I don't either. And that's just, you know what? And here's the thing, too. I would have no issue. See, it says for the next title blurb, and that's what's really throwing me, is who is Tiger Shark? Well, that leads me to believe Tiger Shark's identity is going to mean something. Right. And even if it's not him, you hit the nail on the head right now. What it is I'm looking to see where James Gordon Jr. is going to pop up. So if he turns out not to be Tiger Shark, I have zero issue with that. And there's that part of me that's like, well, maybe he's not. So I'm not 100% sold on that, but I'm looking at different clues with him. I'm trying to find out who he's going to be. And that's something I'm really liking about the mystery of this. It's not that I care that I necessarily figure it out before it actually happens. It's that I'm enjoying the ride so much that I'm trying to find clues as to where he's going to appear next.
Well, that's a good villain. Like a villain, my favorite villains are ones where you just feel the fear. Like if I see a Joker, like when you see a Joker card or something, you go, "Oh, what's going to happen?" Like I'm worried now, and that's what I feel about Jim Gordon's son. Like this guy is scary.
Oh yeah, and that's what it is with him. I know he's not just going to be a small-time villain. Mm-mm. Whatever happens with him, whether he's Tiger Shark or not, is irrelevant to me. It's going to be big.
And Gordon can see a killer a mile away. He is gone after and taken down without Batman some of the most heinous killers in Gotham in the world, and yet he looks at his son's eyes and he can't tell.
See, Zucco's daughter makes mention of the fact that the other player in this game, besides Roadrunner, is somebody who she's never seen before.
Right.
And that he stays, like, away from the shore and does all this. So I'm, like, sitting here, I'm like, oh, boy. That sounds like something. Because to me, there's going to be a heavy cerebral aspect to whatever James Gordon Jr. is doing. Yeah. And when she was saying those things, I'm like, ooh. This is where I'm seeing James Gordon heading. He's going to strike in something like this. Whether it's him or not, it's going to be something like that. And I'm digging that aspect of the mystery of all this as it's unfolding. When the opening of this issue, part 2 of this Hungry City, the dialogue with the artwork in this one is terrific, because you see him trying to figure out a way out of this. And it's like he adds kind of a reality to all this that Jim and I talk about this a lot on the show. It's there's certain heroes that make you feel like, wow, I really want to be a superhero. And there's other superheroes that add to the reality of, it's really impressive that he does this because I couldn't. There are moments it all feels hopeless. This mission of ours. Moments when I can't help but wonder if it's all just one big dead end. And when you see that dialogue right there in the beginning, Max, of that picture, I'm like sitting here like, whoa. But then it builds into, I know the others must have moments like this too. Bruce, Tim, even Damian, though we never really talk about it. For me, the bad moments usually come in the morning when I've just gotten home from patrol. The sun is just coming up, and I've spent the last 10 hours dealing with some particularly disgusting example of humanity, the worst of the scum. And I just love how this just continues to build to just really how sometimes it's tough to work through all this. It's tough to take that additional step. But what's motivational about these characters and what I love about it, and it makes me go, wow, they're really doing something above and beyond. You know, they go beyond that point where other people would say, you know what, I've got to just quit and let the police do their job. I'm helping out. I've done enough. Really, let the police do their job at this point. But no, what's inspirational is they're like, no, it's our mission. I've got to continue on. And in these moments where you see him right now not letting go, not stopping, he's like, he knows he's in dire straits here. He's in danger. And the only way he's going to survive is if he finds a way out of what the Roadrunner's doing. And you see him, I loved him with the little gadget, the little, the electricity coming out of the finger to jumpstart
just a little
car.
thing,
Yeah.
just a taser.
Yeah.
He used a taser. That's all it is.
Right. Just doing every little trick that he knows to try and find a way to get this vehicle to give him the edge that he needs to explode his way out of this before he's done. And I love that we see, look who's waiting for him, 3 guys with some heavy artillery. So that slight distraction, that one little tiny moment here, not only does this serve as a great way of reminding us that we're looking at this Bixby Rhodes, this Roadrunner character,
Right.
but he's also got a whole gang with him in this car lot. And I love that this winds up being a great origin issue for this Roadrunner character, a character who I'm hoping we're going to see again outside of this. Yeah.
Definitely.
You get to see here that he's been doing this since he was a teenager, and that actually this is a character who arguably, you could argue somewhere in your history, you could believe we may have seen him before. Even though that he was never defined, if you get what I mean. But this could have been some villain that we saw in some issue of Batman where him and his teenage friends, Batman stopped from stealing vehicles or whatever. And we may have seen them many times throughout the years. They're those nameless people that we see in various Batman issues, that have never been really defined. I so believe that these are nameless, or, they're on those off panels that we never see in the comic. You know that Batman's still operating at other times that we haven't realized yet. And that's what I loved about this guy. Through the years, he was a kid in a wheelchair who, has found a way through technology to walk again. And that's new. Must be made from some kind of titanium alloy, the way, it absorbs the shock. Analyzing what he's dealing with the legs and realizing I'm never going to outrun this guy.
So he doesn't even try.
Well, he's got better gadgets than Coyote has with Acme. I love that his first tryout, he catches the Roadrunner.
Well, he is pissed.
Yeah, absolutely. He would have been funny if he dropped a boulder on him.
Well, he wants to. You could just tell he wants to drop a car right on top of him and see how you like it.
But what a great bit. But this history, though, because we've always seen a lot of comic storytelling that shows that before Batman and even during Batman's early run, there was a lot of these cops that were on the take that were, and still are. I mean, there's still, Gordon still deals with the fact that his entire force is not on the up and up. He's got his trusted crew, but there's people on the force who constantly are going the shady side. In this world that's ruled by these villains and with all the money that's changing hands in Gotham for these underhanded things, there's these guys who are basically setting up people. I mean, look at that. Here's some guy who gets pulled over in his car. He's done nothing wrong, but because these teenagers stuff stuff into their car, they are getting arrested and their cars are being taken from them. high-end cars are being targeted in Gotham. So you can't, if you're a guy who's made it in Gotham, which in and of itself is a miracle, you can't even afford to have a nice car because somebody is going to do something to you because of it. You're a prey.
That's Gotham, but that is so Gotham.
And that's your police force doing this to you. So then they have these kids who are doing this so they can go on the auction. And it's funny how this kid then turned this into a business. Because they probably got, a few bucks scratch from these officers to keep doing this. For teenagers, that was, impressive money. But nothing that would, like what he's making now doing what he's doing. But this kid grew up this way. And because he grew up so young doing it, he found a way to turn this into a business because that's what the whole car yard was all about.
Well, I like how you can't just keep having the same cookie cutter villain every time. But this is actually a criminal who learned from his experiences. Like, criminals just don't stay the same.
No, and it became not just about smuggling cars. Then it became about smuggling weapons, and
right.
This guy's a big time smuggler. So it would make sense that this smuggler would find a way to operate under the radar, and would say to himself, "Okay, with all this Batman stuff going, let's see what happens if we try going to a big city like Metropolis." Figuring that Metropolis, similar to Gotham, but even probably more opportunities for some high end down in Metropolis, thinking that people wouldn't normally expect this type of thing to happen. You don't have all that, but. What happens then? Superman shows up.
See, and that's not a cookie cutter Superman either. He scared the crap out of them.
Right. But for him to say, I'd rather come back to Gotham and deal with just a man. And I love that, Dick Grayson learned from his mentor. He's listening to all this and saying, I cannot have somebody coming into my city, some villain going to jail and saying, I still am glad I'm in Gotham.
Yeah.
And Dick, in that moment, first I was like sitting there, I'm like, boy, Dick's being real brutal. Then I'm like, no. Dick has to do this because he has to send a message to this guy. You think Superman's better? Superman left you walking. I mean,
like you have to make it that if you set foot in my town and you want to do, you want to pretty much try to run some kind of crime syndicate here, you're going to pay for it.
Right. And that was Dick Grayson totally learning from his mentor in that moment. And even when Jim Gordon, says to him, this guy's going to be back on the streets in a few days because you were trespassing and all that stuff, and there's no evidence, that there was anything else going on here. I like that Dick Grayson says, yeah, but ruining his week makes the rain feel a little less wet, doesn't it? And just saying, because, at that moment, there was nothing else he could do.
Yeah.
I loved the way that whole exchange went down because it's a Gotham story when it's not always about putting the guy in jail permanently. It's about taking him off the streets for now and making him more, making him think again before he does things. Does this lessen the crime spree of this Roadrunner? Yes, because he's going to have to be a lot more careful and calculating on what he does. He's not going to be able to be as big as he was prior to this because he's got to watch himself because he knows Batman's onto him now. And Dick Grayson's not going to be done with this guy. He is going to come after him again. And not only is he going to come after him, now he's on Red Robin's radar. He's on Bruce's radar. This guy is going to be eventually done.
Well, it's funny because this makes me think of, remember with Superman and Grounded, how when he took down that crack house.
Yeah.
And he said, I know he'll be back, but he's gone today.
Right.
And then something tomorrow, I'll do it again tomorrow. But the point is, I make it harder for him each day. And that's all we can do.
Now, Zucco's the one that killed Dick Grayson's family, right?
Yeah.
Which is funny seeing what happens with the daughter. Because she shows up on the scene. It actually shows the maturity of Dick Grayson that he's not putting that on the daughter.
And he wanted to.
Yeah.
In the beginning, he did. The first issue, his first reaction was, here we go. I think she has something to do with it. And he really thought that she was responsible for it, for the death of her assistant. And he had to admit, and even here, he even had to apologize. Here's
my question, though. Do you think she's really on the up and up, or is she in on it with Tiger Shark? There's part of me that wonders, and this is a typical Gotham femme fatale thing. Like, she's either totally clean and on the up and up, which I do believe is a possibility here because I loved her speech, and I'm sitting here, I'm like, I get this, and I get why Dick Grayson reacted what he did, but then there's another part of it, it's like, Oh, I'm looking at that last shot of her when she's looking at him like, is there any possibility this girl's in on it too?
I keep that. You know what? Remember Casino Royale?
Yes.
This is what this made me think of. Like, okay, everything is cool, but wait a minute. It's the look that she get. Wait a minute. And then when you thought, well, she's evil, she gets what she deserves, then you find out otherwise. And that's how I feel about this, because I'm like, I want to believe her.
I do too.
But I keep waiting for the knife to come out her coat and just stab him in the back.
Right. And I do believe there's a possibility she's totally on the up and up. So I'm not totally in the camp of thinking that she's not. I like, though, that Gotham just naturally makes you feel tentative. Like the atmosphere. This book visually is all, because in that whole rain sequence with her, like, I feel like she's on the up and up. Emotionally, she's playing it off right, but it's the darkness of Gotham. It's the atmosphere of the bats flying around. It's everything you see in the rain as it's soaking the cowl. I mean, this is what a great way to play with panels in this sequence.
Well, Dick Grayson feels the same way, and
yes.
That we feel like he wants to trust her, but part of him is saying, I don't know.
This book just is chock full of atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
This is I love this about comics. It's when creators just have a wonderful time playing with, even the sequence before where she goes, I was hiding something, but I'm not hiding anymore. And right. You see her full and tall, and the two panels are next to her with the bats flying in the background, the plain white background there. That was something that I really appreciated, the decisions to use that periodically, that plain white background. With the bats kind of just frame, that's the color that's being added to that sequence. It just, to me, it was just a great visual mood setting. And this book is just chock full of atmosphere, this whole run with the Jock and David Barron and Scott Snyder, of course, writing. Then it actually made the sequence all the more dynamic when you turn the page at the end and go, let me get this straight. You said rotten apple and she was right behind you, and you see this gorgeous shot of the boat with the sun rising. I'm like, wow, what just a great way to open this up.
I kind of see them hooking up, though. I
do
really see that.
And her being either totally on the up and up, or being a Talia al Ghul, for example, where you find out,
And how do you have feelings for the? I mean, even though she didn't cut the cord that killed your parents, but still, how would you feel if you started to have feelings for the daughter of the man that killed your parents?
Well, unless you go on to the theory that he's recognizing she was a victim of that too. If she really is on the up and up, then she was, and she's been victimized by it her whole life. Mm-hmm. So I could see him connecting with her over that.
I see that connection too, but there's always got to be that part of you, and that's what I love. That's what the story. Though this is the story I want to see.
Yes,
but there's always going to be that part of you that's going to say, that little voice is going to say, she killed your mom and dad. Like, no, she didn't do it, but that little party, that little devil part of you that says her father is the one that killed your mom and dad.
I love that whole you're breaking up Red Robin thing,
right?
Because Red Robin's pointing exactly what you're saying out to him. It's scientifically impossible for our connection to click.
And that's what your best friend does. That's
right.
What your brother, your best friend, they see through your crap. Like when you say, I don't really care about her like that. She was all right. She was nice. Your friends know you like her, don't you? Like that. This is what I love to read in a comic, because this is so real.
When I saw that whale cut open and the body, and then I remember James Jr. as a kid and what happened with the girl disappearing, and
right.
the sea life involvement there, the implied sea life involvement there. And then looking at this, it just, I don't know why. There's a big, strong part of me that's feeling Tiger Shark, James Gordon. And I could be totally off base on this. That's one of the great things about speculation. There's been so many times I've been so far off the mark.
Well, the connections are plausible, though. Like, you have me thinking about it now, because the connections are there. It didn't occur to me that he would be that.
What I love about Batman detective stories, though, and this is what you and I are touching on right here. It's the thrill of the hunt, and you don't care when Batman's one step ahead of you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I like following along for the ride. I feel like I'm a sidekick as I'm reading this right now. We see him swimming down under seas, and I'm sitting here, I'm like, okay, I'm following Batman's logic, kind of going through the story, trying to figure out this thing, and knowing that, Batman's going to figure this out before I will. Mm-hmm. But I love being along for the ride and hoping I figure it out too.
Well, the old Batman stories that Neil Adams and Jim Aparo drew and stuff, where we would they would take us on the ride, and you would hear Bruce's thoughts, you read his thoughts as he goes through a mission. I used to love those stories because of that type of writing.
Oh, absolutely, because you want to feel like you're there. Mm-hmm. It's even when there was Batman and Robin, I always felt like I was the additional sidekick there. Like,
exactly.
It's you want to feel like that you're this panel that we're looking at is like our eyes looking on this whole situation, and I love that about this run of Detective Comics. I felt like that all the way through. Like when we see this last page, so now I've found Tiger Shark's front door. All that's left to do is find the man himself, and you see this big, underground ship. Is that what that is?
It looks like a souped up submarine.
Yeah, inside there. I'm anxious to see what this is, but this is a very James Bond-ish ending. I mean that in a good way. Because you see that surprise moments where like all the guns are now trained on Batman. Mm-hmm. He's got six guns at least.
Yeah,
and it looks like, I don't know if I'm looking right up in the upper echelon. There might be a couple more up there, but there's 6 definitely in the background area trained on him, with a possibility of some more in the foreground with us. I'm like, whoa! And the whales, which then connects to me to the whale that we saw earlier.
Exactly.
In the story. So we're seeing this all come together. Just such a great, exciting run. I love long form storytelling. I like the shorter stories too. In comics. I like when a creative team gets, because to me, I like the advantage of that. One writer might have an idea for a 3-issue arc for their book, and then another writer might have an idea for a 12-issue big year-long run, like which is what we're getting here with Detective Comics. I like variety. While one story's paying off in another title, this story's heating up over here.
Right.
You just got like different pacing going on through comics, and nothing's cookie cutter. It's all, creative. And I do feel like right now we're in an era where we're just getting a lot of really cool creativity like this book's giving us, of just different kinds of ways of looking at how can we tell a story using these characters. And that's why am I getting more excited for September? Because we're getting a lot of these creators right now who are doing stuff like this. And they're going to be continuing to tell these.
In the interview, they said that they're going to concentrate on like 4-issue stories and just to get you involved in the lives of the characters.
And I'm hoping though that we do get opportunities to get stuff like this. Your bigger form stories too. And you know what? Let me say this. This story right here is a great example of these are broken up into little 3-issue arcs, but there's a big overarching story that connects everything.
Exactly. It's all one big story after you kind of get through it, but you feel like there's little missions here and there, little 4 parts here, a 2-parter here, but it all counts. Like the all the stuff with Jim talking to his son. That was just a small little issue, but it's still carrying on to this.
Well, and I don't think anything in this run, and I'm not disputing anything. I'm 110% in agreement with everything you just said. But one of the things I love about this is the stuff that appears to us as readers as being this small little thing, I think is going to have big, huge payoffs.
Yeah. Which is what I love stories like that.
Oh, I do too. Because I'm with you. I mean, like everything you were saying, I'm like, oh, hey, man, I'm with you. That's exactly what I was seeing too.
That's what I want. That's what I want to read. Because I want to feel like when I'm reading the story, I want to feel like every story counts. It matters, and it's connected. But I also want to be able to just, even if I want to tell somebody about it, I want them to just check out this 2 issues or just check out this 4 issues. And you'll get a kind of a feel for how the series is as a whole. And I think that's a good way to kind of bring people in, to try out some of these books.
Do you have time to talk Wonder Woman and the Furies?
Yeah.
Let's. This was the last one that you had mentioned, and this is a good wrap-up issue to kind of wrap up this episode for us. But let me ask you this: what made this stand out as a title you wanted to read in Flashpoint? Because and you're not getting all the Flashpoint tie-ins, correct?
No, I'm getting this Aquaman, Deathstroke, and Worlds of Flashpoint.
Okay. What drew you to Wonder Woman?
I like the character anyway. So that and just seeing the idea of having an angry just like they would show the pictures of Wonder Woman just fighting and battling, and I just love to see a different version of Wonder Woman. Like, we've had the kind Wonder Woman, we've had the superhero Wonder Woman, but to see pretty much like an evil Wonder Woman, not evil, but just this is a different side that we've really ever seen of Diana. That
helmet that she's wearing, I've come to realize, I think is Mira's helmet.
That's what I'm thinking.
Because we talked about this a couple episodes ago, and I was looking at that. I'm like, I think that doggone thing is Mira's helmet, and I'm more convinced than ever now because it looks identical to it. I'm looking at the cover, and I like the cover because this is the shot that we all saw initially. Mm-hmm. We got to see Hawk Girl back there. That looks like Wonder Girl. And
it looks like Cassie.
And that's Donna Troy, I think, over by Big Ben. If I'm looking at that correctly, that might be Donna Troy way up in the background.
Could be.
I don't know. I think some of those things were put in deliberately just to kind of give those of us that were fans kind of an idea of where some of the other female characters might wind up in this, and I could be diving on that one. But this is written by Dan Abnett and Andy Lanning. Pencils by Pencils by Scott Clark. Ink by Dave Beatty. Nei Rufino is the colorist. Travis Lanham on letters. That's where I was getting. I think I said Travis Lanham earlier when we were talking about it. Like that's where when you were talking about Travis Charest, I was thinking of I was looking at him as letterer when I was doing up some notes for this issue. Ed Bennis with Pete Pantazis on the cover. Darren Shan, assistant editor. And then Brian Cunningham is editor, and Wonder Woman created, of course, by William Moulton Marston. This one I was particularly interested in this because I wanted to know the mystery of, we knew Hippolyta died.
Right.
I want to know how. And I was pointing the finger from the get-go on not Aquaman as much as his brother, Orm.
Yeah, Orm, he looked guilty.
Now, the funny part and the twist, I'm going to jump right to this because I think this is the pivotal event in this whole thing. Mm-hmm. The death turns out not to be from Orm. Well, see, I was kind of right on that, but I was kind of wrong because it's Artemis, but Artemis has a partnership, it looks like, with Orm.
I had made a funny thing where did you watch Star Trek, The Undiscovered Country?
Oh, yeah.
I thought
big
that how enemies got together because they didn't want to get together.
Well, and this story fits such a human problem.
Oh yeah.
Why are the two races afraid of each other? Because of their differences.
Right.
And you see these two people who are true leaders in Diana and Arthur recognizing if we put this union together and we show them a better way by bringing our two people together, and really just showing people that we are the same. Look at all of our commonalities. We're two warrior races. We have the same ideals. There's so much more in common from us than's different. If we can show the world this, we can be a symbol of a direction that this people needs to head in. And they're really sacrificing their chance at happiness with true loves, quote unquote, so to speak, to show a better way. Which really, they are, in those moments, they're being the Wonder Woman and Aquaman that we know in a world without a Superman and Batman that we're used to. Exactly. The two of them are taking over that leadership role that we may have seen for the Trinity previously. Mm. They're both stepping up to the plate and filling in those moments. Unfortunately, the people around them who are so afraid of change, so afraid of embracing that, hey, our two peoples can come together and really maybe they're right. In this horrifying moment, they kill Hippolyta instead. I really loved this because I do think it's an interesting statement on the human condition. And it's a message for all of us that, we shouldn't be so freaked out by everything that's different.
Yeah, I mean, we could be stronger. Like they're trying to say, we could be stronger by being a part of them. Like, we can learn from each other and be even a stronger nation. And all they're concerned of is you're going to make me weaker. If we get with them, we're gonna be weaker because of it.
Right. And not realizing that throughout history's also shown that differences become strengths because you learn from differences of others, and they learn from your differences. And, it's something where, as a people, we need to embrace. And I loved that intelligence about this. The artwork in this was gorgeous.
Well, this is what I meant by some of the artists and writers that came out of Wildstorm. Scott Clark was a Wildstorm artist.
Yeah, and I mean, woof, this whole shot of Themyscira, and it really got to compliment the inker and the colorist on this. Just the whole thing there. Wow. I mean, this was very, very well done, how this was put together. Because you see this past history with them, which was the quote-unquote 14 years ago, very majestic looking. Like Themyscira is always one of those places where you want to run around, and you actually see Diana doing that. Like, there's a lot of hope. And yet for her, there's this, I've been on this island, I'm restless. I want to see more of the world. It's an adventure. This whole sense of it. I've got a buddy of mine who, he's a school teacher in California. And he's a diver. And he's gone to just amazing places because that's his whole thing. Every year he's going somewhere else around the world that's, I think to most of us would be like wacky, that he's doing all this. But he'll go on his own, for like 3 and 4 weeks at a time to places sight unseen that he's never been before. Just to go on dive trips, that you wonder, like, what's the food going to be like? Are you going to live when you're there? That type of thing.
Yeah, I'll be worried about that stuff.
But I'm watching this kind of stuff, and I'm like sitting there, I'm connecting with her. I'm like, well, I get that through him, her sense of adventure, being like, hey, this is a chance. I know that's a risk, and she gets in some real danger here because she comes across this big ship. But that isn't the major problem. A kraken comes out of the water and starts looking at... A baby
kraken.
Yeah. Wait. Yeah, that's right. Wait, and look at this huge kraken who winds up being a baby, sees her as lunch. Now, we know her as being this Amazon with strength. We always come at Diana from this warrior strength. And I love that all she needs is that quick distraction by Aquaman. She's fighting underwater. This is out of her element. And she's still fighting. He's connecting with her fierceness. There's a respect growing right away in the way that she carries himself. He's noticing a kindred spirit. Not love, a kindred spirit. So these are two...
This is Mira. This is, I kind of assumed that he was already in a relationship with Mira anyway.
Oh, at this moment? Yeah,
I'm assuming that.
I'm curious to see what the relationship, if Mira's even entered into the picture at this point, or how they worked that out, this relationship between the two of them. But she's been poisoned at this point, which I loved looking back at the artwork and seeing, her shoulder that was bleeding and clearly seeing that, she'd been tagged. And just the art attention to detail. But him recognizing compassionately, like, okay, I've got to rescue her. Because
he didn't even hesitate.
No. And knowing that, he's making her aware of their people, their city, when he could have left her.
Yeah, he didn't know she was good or bad. It could have been a trap.
But a month later, they come back, and this shows like the conversations the two of them had during that month to reach a point where the two of them are saying, "Hey, our two people have got something in common." This fits her sense of adventure there. That adventure that led me to the gates of Atlantis was impetuous, I admit, but I believe it has opened up new possibilities for both our peoples. Both nations have long been considering how they might best engage with the outside world, and we've feared the consequences of revealing ourselves. I believe this is something the Amazons and Atlanteans would best face together. We can share the wisdom and experience of our noble cultures with humanity because the world is young and volatile. It is the duty of Amazons and the Atlanteans to save this planet from itself. So the two of them are really looking to say, hey, and which was part of Diana's original mission. back when Steve Trevor showed up on the scene. This is just showing now this world is so different than the one with Superman and Batman. Those changes have had this major trickle effect. No Flash being in World War II with Jay Garrick. Look how much has changed in this world. Nazis, I believe on the map, if I remember correctly, the Nazis occupied all of South America, I think?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
So, I mean, it shows that there's drastic changes to what have happened in this world. And these two are looking at the state of the world and the people who are taking over different territories and saying, wait a minute, we have a chance here to make this better by getting married. The look of shock on everybody's face, like there's not one person smiling in either group because nobody saw it coming.
He overreacted when he saw them.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I love that it was Vicky Vale that was basically taking care of the marriage ceremony, reporting it to the world. They would want this to be a public thing.
Oh, yeah.
Especially nowadays with what's going on with, we saw in England, the wedding of the prince. And, this would be something that would be worldwide. People would want to see this. They would want to be a part of this event. And what a great way to get people rallying behind it. Because look how we all rally. I'm not from England. But, man, I was rallying behind that being on TV.
Yeah, people got up at 3 a.m. to watch that?
Yeah, my wife got really into it, so she had me TiVo the whole thing.
Uh-huh.
So, I'm like sitting on the couch, I'm reading comics. I got to admit, wait, hold on, I'm not going to take anything away from it, though. I started watching the doggone thing, and I got into it, too. I'm like, look at all the glamour, and, people are happy. This whole country got out, and they're behind these two, this prince.
Right.
And getting married, I'm like, wow, that's kind of neat. It's a big celebration that they're doing this. And when this happened in Flashpoint, I'm connecting with that. I'm like, our world, and Orm's right there, and you could tell right away Orm's a detractor. I thought this was the writing on the wall when I was reading this, that Orm is the one that's taking out Hippolyta.
Oh, yeah, I already knew that there was something up with Orm as soon as I saw him. And just the look of it that he had, and what he was saying to Arthur, still trying to talk him out of it.
Now, when we see the Atlantean there, I was guessing it was somebody working with Orm. I'm like, okay, Orm, one of Orm's Atlanteans. I did not see Artemis coming.
No, that I didn't see. I didn't see that. But then it made perfect sense that it would take somebody from both sides.
Oh, yeah. I like that Garth wasn't a part of it.
Yeah, that was because I got worried that maybe I thought maybe he would be the one that would betray Arthur.
Unfortunately, he is, at least in everybody else's eyes. And I like the one that covers it up is Hippolyta's sister. The one who says murderer and kills him. She doesn't let it. She doesn't let it be revealed.
Yeah,
because he was ready in his last words to tell him that it was Orm that did it, and she covers up for it right at the right minute. So it was like, oof. I'll be curious to see if that ever comes out.
It has to.
Right?
It has to come out. And when Diana finds out, I can only imagine her response.
Well, see, I'm wondering if both Arthur and Diana, if they eventually find out what really happened.
I'm thinking they do, but but so far, I'm thinking that Diana killed Mira.
I'm thinking so too, but I'm wondering if maybe the two of them find out they were duped. If maybe that would be enough to bring the two of them in league with Bruce. I mean, not Bruce. I'm sorry.
With Barry?
Thomas and Barry. Batman's flight. As far as this whole quest to bring the world back to the way it should be, or to a better place, recognizing that there's these two people like, okay, so if you shift the world back, could my mom be back? If you shift the world back, could Mira be back? These are people now who have something in common with Thomas Wayne, who have something in common with Barry. This is these commonalities that they figure out what happened here. Will it be enough to make enemies allies for the possibility of restoring? Because Sinestro's going to know about this prophecy of the Flashpoint. How is everyone going to come together? I'm digging this event so far.
It's a tragedy though, because when they do find out what really happened.
Oh yeah,
and already killed the woman that he loved.
Right, and can those two get past that enough? To take a bigger leadership role in restoring things to what they are, or are they going to be forever doomed to be caught up in the, like you said, the tragic circumstances of this story?
Yeah,
and I don't know.
He killed what? He killed millions.
And so did she. So did she.
Yeah, I mean, and to think you killed her, and he was already reflective. In his book, he was already kind of reflective of the deaths that he caused, but he's still doing it because he thinks that she betrayed him.
They've both been puppets, though.
Yeah.
And they do have that commonality there. So what happens when they find it out? And, is that going to be the death of a mother and the death of... Well, and here's the other thing, too. Did Diana kill Mira? Or did Orm?
That's the thing, because I know there are some cultures where when you kill someone, you take a piece of their, armor, and you wear it as a badge that you killed a good warrior. When you fight a good warrior, they take a badge. It's kind of like their badge of saying, I fought this great warrior, and I beat this great warrior. That's what made me assume, but I could be totally wrong. It could be that. Maybe Mira died some other way, or maybe Mira might have tried to help her. And she took the helmet as respect.
Here's the question I have. Because look at the ending of this issue, and it's this sequence that makes me... See, my first thought was initially that Diane is definitely the one responsible for the death of Mira, but there's that part of me that's thinking, I don't know what circumstances leads her to getting the helmet. I don't know how this works. But, the sister comes back with a regrettable mistake. And you see Artemis saying, Hippolytus saw the light, catch the armor. She blocked my intended target. No matter, the result is the same. The Union is in tatters. Here's the part that makes me wonder. Tell Orm it's his turn. His turn for what?
Yeah, that it could be that he kills... Because the whole thing is they're supposed to make the other one think that they did it. So he could kill Mira and then make Arthur think that Artemis killed.
Because there's no reason, if Mira's killed, there's no reason for Arthur to try to clear his name.
Right.
There's still this argument at this point that if it's one-sided, because Arthur's driven in this massive bloodthirst.
Yeah.
So he's being manipulated. Both of these two are being manipulated. It almost seems too easy that it would be Diana that killed Mira. Well, I don't, but how did she get the helmet is kind of my question. I don't know. I'm curious to see how this plays out. But I think Orm has to play a role in that.
He has to. He has to kill somebody that Arthur cares about to anger Arthur enough to keep the war going.
Just cool. I love otherworldly events, and this is a great example of what makes Abnett and Lanning such a great writing team. They really crafted this sense of scope and scale and political intrigue into tragic events, because I love their take on political. I think politics and superhero comics work so well so many times, and this fits some of my favorite stories of theirs. So I'm just really digging. They crafted a lot in one issue.
Yeah, well, they're so good at juggling a lot of characters and storylines, and that's what I think was so good about their Annihilation stories and stuff that they did, because they had space. They practically had space operas, actually.
Well, and this is similar to that. This is what I like about all that kind of stuff. It's a great historical piece that, it has that kind of pulpy opera feel, yet it doesn't feel like it's out of its current time period, and that's a nice balance.
I can't wait for the issue 2. Flashpoint I've been enjoying, so I love the getting to see the characters that have different types of stories.
I like that the minis are separate pieces, though. They flesh out and add something to the Flashpoint story, but they're their own pieces in and of it. This is an interesting and compelling story. And when I read this issue, I didn't feel like, oh my gosh, I got to go read Flashpoint 1 and 2 to connect with this. No, I get that this takes place in the Flashpoint world, but it's a separate story. It's a precursor, and I like that. It's I can read this book independent of itself. When it's all done, I know I'm going to be able to do that. It'll point back to, I'm sure, the main series, but it's a nice contained piece that fleshes out the world, and very different than Emperor Aquaman.
Yeah, it is.
Which is also a good one. So I'm enjoying that. Darrell, tell us a little bit about your other podcasts, where people can find them, and what's going on. I was talking to you beforehand, your Green Lantern episode on No Apologies. But tell people, you've got a lot of podcasts going on right now. And one of the things I really enjoy about your podcasting work is each one of them is very different in flavor and tone. So tell people a little bit about your podcast and what's coming up.
Okay, well, I kind of took the podcast, the different ones that I do, and we kind of put it together, and we kind of made like a little network out of it. Kind of like how with PKD and Legion of Dudes and Half Hour Wasted, how they kind of came together with their podcast.
Kind of like what Comic Book Noise is doing. Well, you call it don't you call it the Taylor Network? Isn't that what?
Yeah, call it. It's funny because I'm on one of the podcasts with Comic Book Noise now. I'm on DC Noise. I'm one of the regulars on that show too with Mike and Keith, and I love doing that show too. So it's we get to talk a lot of DC stuff. We don't talk about food and things like that. We go on tangents on that show too. I think it's a DC thing to go on tangents.
I'm a big fan of DC Noise. You and I were talking about DC Noise actually in a conversation we were trading back and forth, and there'll be times where I listen to DC Noise. I'm usually behind on it on purpose because if we're talking about similar topics, I don't want to hear their show and be influenced by it, if that makes sense. Where I wind up saying the same things that they said on their show, and then because I do recognize the fact that we obviously with DC fans will share a lot of listeners. Mm-hmm. So I don't want our listeners to say, well, I just heard the same thing on DC Noise or vice versa. So I deliberately do that. Yeah. It's a great show. What's coming up on, or what's been recently released on DC Noise?
What was the last thing we did? We did a little Flashpoint. We talked about Green Lantern. That was the last thing we did. We talked about the movie. And I'm glad I didn't listen to Raging Bulls before I did that, because you made me think about some other things about the movie when I was listening to your latest show. And we just got into, we kind of go all over the board, because we talk about a lot of stuff that's going on with DC, and then we'll actually mention a lot of other stuff we're reading. You still there?
Yeah, no. Oh, I'm sorry.
So we kind of we'll go to a Marvel book or an Image book, or we throw it all in there because we just love we all love comics, period. So I mean, we're talking about one company, but sometimes you can't help but talk about other books from other companies. So it's just fun to do that.
I'm writing down a list of things because I want to make sure that I'm listing the podcasts that you're on. And it was easy. It was easier before when you used to be on. It was like one or two shows.
It just gets worse for me. But I started at the Fixers Hideout, and that we're still running strong with that.
Right.
With that show. And we're almost up to, what are we up to? Almost up to 200, I think.
Gosh, it doesn't seem like that long ago that we were all chatting for the first time at New York.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It flies by.
Now, you got Comic Book Roadshow as well.
Yeah, I got Comic Book Roadshow. That's the interview show, and we've gotten a lot of good interviews. Like we've had Chris Robertson, who is the writer of iZombie and Cinderella for Fabletown, and he's doing the Superman grounded storyline. And we've also had Howard Chaykin.
Good score.
And we got to talk to him about some of the stuff that he's working on with the Avengers, and he might have hinted at some things that's coming up. We've also talked to Victor Calvigesh. He has the craziest name, but it's hard to pronounce. But he does the Image. He writes the Image book, Blue Estate.
Oh, nice.
If you like 100 Bullets, I think you will really enjoy this book. It has all those different characters. It's a really good crime book. So if you like that, you'll enjoy it.
Image is publishing a lot of top quality stuff. I'm talking about, and I want to say unique comic book properties that are out there. It's really great to see so much out there. But companies like Boom are doing it too. We're seeing a lot more diversity in the types and styles of comic books that are being published all around the medium. Both in the
like Samurai's Blood. we've also interviewed the writer of that, and that's a period piece, set in the past, the ancient samurai warriors. I mean, and then we have Charles Soule, who does the Image comic 27, which is like more into music, and it tackles those stories about music and how it changes, and the trade is coming out pretty soon. I think trade comes out the 29th of June, so if you want to check that. And then we have No Apologies, which is pretty much a bunch of friends getting together, just talking comics. And you mentioned that Jamal Igle was on, and we talked about the Green Lantern movie. And before him, we've had J.K. Woodward and Lord Retail, who is a comic store owner. And we got to talk to him about, a lot of the DC stuff we're talking about, like what his customers are they buying the books? Are they canceling books? How they're dealing with the market. And we got to talk to J.K. Woodward about Fallen Angel and how he does his artwork. And the trade for Fallen Angel should be coming out pretty soon. So we had
for DC fans who read the Fallen Angel series, it went over to IDW,
right,
and continued on. Same writer, and J.K. became the artist on the book, and some of the artwork in that is just breathtaking. And some of it. It's a page turner. It's one of those where I just, not just as a cool story, but it's visually stunning. That's another one that I'd love to see on the screen. Not with live action actors. I would love to see that artwork somehow translated in emotion, because it comes to life in such a way that it's just a cutting edge series. And I was so glad to see that, because I enjoyed it so much at DC, and I was so sad when it was canceled. I was glad that it found a home, and I honestly think it's one of those books where I think it was better served making the move.
Yeah, I really do. They were able to pretty much have the freedom to do what they wanted to do with the story, and you can tell when you read it.
Yeah, so it wound up being very, very cool. It's funny, you were talking about No Apologies. And actually, wait, do you have this is funny, I got all of your podcasts on iTunes for me. When you went to the Taylor Network, is there a central feed or a central location that people should go to find everything on the Taylor Network, or should they just go to individual sites? Or
we have one website that has all the podcasts together. Like we put together with Julian is he's on No Apologies with me, and he came up and put all the podcasts together for me and designed it. So you can go to the Taylor Network.wordpress.com and everything will come up, and you can check out all the different podcasts. And the other one is Nothing's On with Donnie Salvo, he's called the show before, I think, a couple of times.
Absolutely. And Donnie's also on Reality Wasted.
Yes, he's on Reality Wasted, which is coming back.
And he's also on the PKD one.
Yeah, he's on PKD Black Box with Sean. And he does Tales of the Attic when he takes a comic from his long box, and he has a lot of comics to take, and any old, new, whatever, and reads it in his own style.
You know what? That's one. It's called Tales of the Attic.
Yeah,
I have not heard that one. I follow Donnie's stuff just because I really like Donnie, and that's one. I'll put that in the notes too for people to follow.
You got to catch that. It's on the PKD Black Box. When you go on that, it's on the same feed, so you can catch it there. And we do TV together. That's the show or podcast where Nothing's On, where we just talk TV and get on each other's nerves for about an hour.
And for everyone listening, don't worry about writing a lot of this down right now. I know for a lot of these, I'm not putting the exact site names on it. I will have these in the show notes, which will then be not only on whatever media, if you're listen to this on your iPod or whatever, it'll be in the show notes there. You can also find it right on our website and click directly on them. So don't worry if you're not writing these down as you're listening to this. Feel free to go to the show website, and you can get direct links straight to these websites and connect to some of these podcasts and try them out, though. These are people that are friends of the show just because they're just, I find them fun and entertaining, and I really enjoy the work that you guys are doing. So,
yeah, I love it. Dude, I podcast with the best. I wouldn't be able, just like you and Jim, you couldn't do it if you weren't friends with the people that you podcast with. So
I really got that vibe. I was listening to the Green Lantern show, and I really got that vibe. It was funny. It was the sign of a good podcast is the one where I'm actually talking to your podcast as I'm listening to it. And I was listening to it, and one of the questions that came up was, why was Hector Hammond being flashed to when Hal was doing the oath? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, it's because they were pulling in Parallax, and that's how they knew Hal was wearing Abin Sur's ring. Because Hector had the infection inside him,
right.
from Parallax, because he did the what do you call it, the operation on Abin Sur's body. And when he got that infection on him, when we were seeing him going through the changes, he was connecting to Parallax, which was waking up like Parallax, and pointing him towards Earth. And when Hal was doing the oath during that same time, you also saw flashes to Parallax. And it was because of that triangle, Parallax knew where Abin Sur's ring was. And that's what led him away from Oa to Earth. So
that is true.
So that chain of events actually did have a purpose. That chain of events was to lead Parallax away from Oa. Because remember, the Green Lanterns on Oa were all gearing up to defend themselves from Parallax coming to Oa. That was what made the shift from Oa to Earth. It was Hector Hammond and Hal Jordan in those moments, the trade-off back and forth that drew Parallax in. So there actually was a reason why they kept flashing to Hector Hammond during those moments. But here was the great thing about it, and I was thoroughly engaged. And I recommend everybody to listen to this, to the discussion you guys were having on Green Lantern, because you guys were throwing out a lot of interesting commentary on things you were noticing in the film. And that was just one small example of times where I was really getting drawn in to the discussion of some great friends who were having a good time talking about this film. So, and other things that went along with it. It was great how you're...
not all of us are some of us are not really into DC. Like Raphael that calls, he listens to your show.
Right. Oh, yes, I know.
And when he's a part of the show, and so we always debate back and forth about this Green Lantern thing and some of with the movie and whatnot, because he really did not care for the movie. So you can hear on the show how we just keep debating back and forth on what characters would make it and what DC characters would not. And it's just fun to have that dialogue with each other, because we talk to each other every day almost about, what characters would work and what characters wouldn't work. And
he's a Marvel guy.
Yeah, he's a Marvel guy. So
mainly he does, because I know from because he posts on our Facebook page a lot too, and we've had discussions that way. He's called into the show.
Yeah.
And it's funny, when I was listening to the show, I was thinking to myself, like, dude, you've had some great Marvel movies this summer. You can give the DC one a break.
Oh, he would just not let. And then I would go after Spider-Man movies, and then we would just go back and forth. We do it all the time, but it's just fun to have that, verbal joust about things sometimes back and forth.
It's great geeky talk, because this has been the summer of comic book movies. I mean, yes. Oh my gosh, I'm really sad actually to see, because I'm going to say this. I think the overall quality of the comic book movies that have been released this summer has been very high. I thought Thor was a good movie. I really enjoyed Thor. I'm not a big Thor guy. I'm a Marvel fan, actually. But Thor was one of those growing up. I enjoyed him on Avengers, on the team. I except for the Simonson run, I've read very broken Thor runs. I did like Straczynski's when he was writing it. I thought that was really the recent relaunch that Straczynski did on him.
I've read that too. That
was really good. So, I mean, I'm not an anti-Thor guy, but boy, X-Men First Class hit, and I really dug that. Because I am an X-Men fan. And it's, then we got Green Lantern, I thought was a really good film, and I'm excited for Captain America. You guys made an interesting point, though, about the sheer number of comic book movies. And I don't want to say too much about what was going on in your show. I'm actually just going to recommend everybody to listen to the podcast, because I'm going to regurgitate your whole podcast here, and I really want people to go and listen. There was some really great commentary on not just the Green Lantern film. You guys went on a really nice tangent about Dark Knight, and then you started comparing to other comic book films out there and talking about what works in comic book films and what doesn't, what draws you into conversations about comic book films and what doesn't. So it's not just an episode about Green Lantern. It's an episode about comic book films in general and what, as fans, you find as top quality ones. You also talk about speculation about will there or won't there be a sequel, and those are things that I'm going to save for people to listen to. No apologies, and it's your most recent episode on it. So definitely, actually, it might be you'll probably have another episode by the time this is released, but definitely check out No Apologies and listen to that episode. It's really, really well done, and I had a good time listening to it.
Yeah, the last one is, as I said it, that's with me and Simba, and that's pretty much just me and him. Just it's a comic podcast. This is barroom talk, basically, is what it is. So you can't play it around children.
You know actually, that's one thing I do want to say once again. One of the things I really like about your shows is when people, probably the first thing people are saying, why so many different shows? They're all different. So I recommend for people who are listening to this, listen to each one of them and pick and choose which ones are your favorites. You're going to probably find that you fall in love with all of them, but there's definitely a different flavor for each different show. Like they're labeled as different podcasts because they really truly are, from the ground up, very different programming. So it's interesting to me how you're like the centerpiece that draws me in, because I really like your commentary, so I tend to like following you to whatever you're doing. But it was funny to me how, listening to every different show, I'm like, wow, these are completely different programs.
Yeah, we have a different bunch for each, so it's fun and that's why I have fun doing them, because it's somebody I'm doing it with, different friends, just about for every show.
Yeah, and it really does change the complete tone and style of each program, and it adds a very different dynamic to each one. So they are very unique ventures in what they are. So it's a really great variety of programming that you've got out there.
Well, thank you. Thanks a lot, because I appreciate you listening to me. That means a lot, because I started listening to you before I even thought about ever doing a podcast. So,
once you get the bug, it's like a hard bug to put away. It's funny. I did last couple of weeks. I've done a couple other podcasts, and during the summer, I tend to have a little bit more free time to do other shows. Because during the school year, you know how it is. I mean, I don't know how you. I like look at your list of podcasts. I'm like, how in the world does he do all the podcasts he does? I have trouble enough getting one show out.
A lot of help. Like for a Comic Book Road show and No Apologies, Chris has been a major help, because he's edit. So when you hear all that music and different little things in the show and transitions and stuff, that's him sitting down, and he's a teacher too, and that's him sitting down and editing those two podcasts, which gives me room to do the other ones.
Well, that is the funny thing for anybody out there podcasting. I've said this on the show before. That's one of the big considerations in there with podcasting. It's not just the recording. It's the time leading up to it and the time after it that really take a lot of time. They're also very rewarding, though, because when you're done, like you said, you've got a whole network of podcasts going now. And I look back at ours as a body of work when we're done, and it's really nice to have that creative outlet and to have people, and this is something we could both shout out, people like all of you who take the time to listen to our ramblings. We really honestly do appreciate that, because the audience bases that we have that listen to these shows make those times when we're not recording, the work that we put in to get these actually published to you, well worth it, because the recording's always fun. You guys can hear that when you're listening to it. It's the stuff leading up to it and the stuff afterwards that sometimes, that's where it can be a chore sometimes to do podcasts. And you guys are such motivation. So it's kind of a shout out to all of our listeners and friends for continuing to support our podcast. And I do encourage you to please support the Taylor Network. Check out his podcast there. Check out DC Noise. And check out the PKD Black Box. And all these will be in the show notes. So thanks again, Darrell, for coming on the show today. Actually, when Jim was going out of town, you and I have been talking about for the last couple months doing something together again soon. And we get a lot of this we were discussing as we're getting towards the end of my school year, which is absolutely the worst time in the world for me to discuss anything. So the first thing I'm thinking of is, I'm like, I've got to, I've been wanting to talk to Darrell again, and you were the first person I thought of to come on the show to catch up with. And when we were trading off ideas, I said, Darrell, what do you want to talk about? And you threw out these books, and I'm like, this is great, because these are some books that I've been dying to talk about that we haven't had time to talk about on the show yet. So your lineup that you selected was absolutely perfect. So thank you for choosing the content for tonight's show as well. I had a great time discussing it.
Super Show, man. We were all looking for you at Super Show.
I had a flood.
I know.
I was not a happy camper because that's the first one that I missed. I want to thank you again for coming on and joining me on the show today, because it's always great to talk with you, and we'll definitely do this again soon.
All right, man. Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Holy caffeine!
I want to remind everyone, as always, our sponsors are DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. DCBService.com is putting up the new books this week, so be sure to check them out, especially with September. This is a great opportunity if you're interested in some of these new titles to get them at an amazing discount from DCBService.com. Over at InStockTrades.com, I want to remind you to check out the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen Volume 1 trade paperback. Regularly $14.95, 38% off, only $9.27. We're going to be doing that book in the show in August, so that's going to be something we're going to do before we start getting into all of these relaunch titles. We're going to be taking a look at a classic story in League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. We've never done this on the show, and it'll be a fun one. So that's over at InStockTrades.com. Remember, orders of $50 or more give you free shipping. I also want to remind everyone, I forgot to mention this at the beginning of the episode, we are proud members of the Comics Podcast Network and the League of Comic Book Podcasts. Great way to check out other podcasts, such as the ones from Darrell Taylor. So definitely check out the Comics Podcast Network and League of Comic Book Podcasts. Our next episode is going to have Jim back, actually. We're going to be talking from Italy. Jim, we're going to do a recording right before our next show where we're going to be discussing Flashpoint books. And I don't know exactly what books we're discussing yet, because Jim and I are still talking about that. But it's going to be an all Flashpoint follow-up, things that we haven't discussed yet on the show from this Flashpoint event, just to get our thoughts on all these minis and tie-ins that are coming in with the event. So that'll be our next show. And we will see everyone next week.
Bye.
Through space and time, 1,000 different lifetimes, faded for love and flaws and incredibly clear sightlines, swinging your mace around, such a practical outlook, helping the JSA and occasionally supporting your own book. Hawkman, Hawkman, eagle eyes can't see. Hawkman, your plan, me, Hawkman. The villains are closing in, be they Thanon Guard or Egyptian, working so hard to thwart you and Hawkgirl's mission. The odds are not on your side, and danger seems to stack up. Things will be so much easier